Prepare for compelling mysteries where ultimate truth prevails, leaving an indelible mark on both your heart and intellect. During our anniversary celebration, my husband publicly ridiculed me before hundreds of attendees. Marrying her, I felt, was the grandest act of charity of my existence. The type of woman who sustains herself solely by living off another's fortune, mine. The entire assembly erupted in laughter. Business associates and investors regarded me as if I were nothing more than a punchline. I offered no retort. I shed no tears. I calmly placed my drink down and retreated to the restroom. Minutes later, I rejoined the festivities, walked directly to the podium, and took hold of the microphone. And within the ensuing 10 minutes, his seemingly perfect life began to unravel. I truly value your presence. Let's foster this community. Leave a comment and share your location. If this narrative resonates with you, please like and share it. One final note. This story contains fictional elements created for entertainment and insight. Any likeness to real individuals or places is purely coincidental. However, the lesson embedded within this tale is something I believe can serve you remarkably well. They say every woman harbors secrets. Mine is valued at $5 billion. Tonight, I stand before the mirror in our Lincoln Park condominium, smoothing a navy dress purchased from Target for $39. The price tag is long gone, but the memory remains. I recall every detail of this performance, the clearance rack, where I found it, how I ensured Derek saw the receipt, the subtle sigh I emitted when I said, "I hope it's nice enough for your party." He barely glanced up from his phone. "It's fine, Cassie. No one's looking at you anyway." That's the peculiar nature of invisibility. People reveal their true thoughts because they forget you're listening. I smoothed the fabric over my hips, meeting the gaze of the woman reflected back. She appears weary, somewhat faded. Her hair is pulled into a simple ponytail, devoid of an expensive blowout or salon highlights. Her footwear is last season's clearance from Nordstrom Rack. She meticulously cuts coupons from the Sunday paper. She opts for store-brand cereal. She drives a decade-old Honda Civic with a noticeable dent on the passenger side. She is precisely what Derek Blackwell desired. A wife who magnifies his generosity, a charity case he could condescendingly rescue. She is also the most elaborate fabrication I've ever constructed. My given name remains Cassie Monroe. That much is true. However, the persona of the struggling writer, the woman who apologizes for spending $20 on groceries, the timid soul who offers polite nods while Derek's companions dominate conversations at dinner parties, that is pure fiction, and I excel at it. The reality is this. I am the founder and CEO of MC Ventures, a private equity firm managing $5.2 billion in assets across 47 portfolio companies. The MC signifies my initials. It's an illusory identity, a construct shielded by offshore entities and Delaware LLCs. My attorney has filed my taxes separately from Derek since the day we wed. I'd informed him of a modest inheritance from my aunt, approximately $200,000, which I wished to keep separate for sentimental reasons. He chuckled. He actually laughed. $200,000, babe. I earn that in bonuses. Keep your little nest egg. I'm not concerned. That was 4 years ago, August 12, 2020, the day I became Mrs. Derek Blackwell, the day I signed a prenuptial agreement he believed would protect him. The day I willingly entered a cage of my own design, sealing the door behind me. My union with him was not born of love, but of a thirst for revenge. And tonight, our 4th anniversary marks the moment I finally spring the trap. I check my phone. 6:45 p.m. The party commences at 7 p.m. The chosen venue is the rooftop of the Chicago Athletic Association, a place where the cityscape unfolds beneath you as if you commanded it. Derek selected it, naturally. He aimed to impress his colleagues from Sterling and Chase, the investment bank where he holds the position of senior vice president. He craved ostentation. He desired everyone to witness his success, his ascent, his accomplishments. What he remains oblivious to is my ownership of 19% of Sterling and Chase. I acquired these shares discreetly over 3 years, routing them through 3 distinct shell corporations, strategically staying just below the 20% disclosure threshold. I've been an unnoticed presence at his board meetings, a silent shareholder in his quarterly bonuses, a phantom within his operational framework. He perceives tonight as a celebration. He has no inkling it is an execution. I retrieve my handbag, a Kate Spade imitation procured from eBay, and proceed to the door. Derek departed an hour ago to ensure absolute perfection. Translation: he's already on his second whiskey, holding court with his investors, regaling them with tales of deals closed and risks undertaken. He will be boisterous. He will be charming. He will be imprudent. That's when I make my move. As I step into the elevator, I catch my reflection once more in the gleaming steel doors. The weary housewife. The woman no one acknowledges. The dead weight he's carried for 4 years. Let him maintain that perception. Let him believe I am insignificant, penniless, and desperate. Let him stand before 150 people tonight and propose a toast to 4 arduous years of marriage. Let him declare me a burden. Let him humiliate me, because 7 years ago, I made a vow. I stood in a cemetery on a bleak April morning, gazing at a grave that should not exist, and swore to someone I cherished that I would make the man responsible pay for his transgressions. 4 years ago, I embarked on fulfilling that promise by marrying him, and tonight, I will bring it to fruition. The elevator doors glide open onto the lobby. I step out into the Chicago twilight, the skyline shimmering in hues of orange and gold, and I feel nothing but serenity. No apprehension, no uncertainty. Merely the quiet conviction of one who has meticulously orchestrated this moment for years. Derek fancies himself the hunter. He believes he married a woman in need of salvation. He has no idea he has cohabited with a predator. I slip into my dented Civic, ignite the engine, and steer towards the party, towards the reckoning, towards the precise instant when the flawless deception shatters, and the truth descends upon him like a runaway locomotive. However, before tonight's confrontation, you must comprehend the trajectory that led me here. You must apprehend the bedrock upon which this scheme was constructed. You must be acquainted with the woman whose profound cruelty illuminated for me precisely the kind of family Derek hailed from, and why I intuitively understood from the outset that he would never anticipate my arrival. You must meet Patricia Blackwell, Derek's mother, the woman who regarded me with the disdain usually reserved for dirt beneath one's shoe, the woman whose estate became the initial shackle on Derek's cage, the woman who, in her twilight years, would inadvertently furnish me with the instruments for her son's downfall. Because this narrative does not commence with vengeance, it originates with humiliation. And the Blackwell family has consistently demonstrated a profound aptitude for it. October 2020. The inaugural time I crossed the threshold of Patricia Blackwell's residence, I recognized I was encroaching upon enemy territory. The dwelling, situated in Oak Park, was a quintessential sprawling Victorian, adorned with immaculately kept lawns and hedges sculpted into an almost aggressive submission. Old wealth, archaic customs, enduring lineage. Derek had apprised me during the drive. Mother can be rather particular. Simply offer a smile and concur with her sentiments. She'll eventually warm up. She did not. I had barely removed my coat before Patricia materialized in the foyer, her gaze sharp and glacial, dissecting me as a jeweler might scrutinize a passable imitation stone. She was 67 at the time, tall and slender in that distinctive manner achieved by affluent women through rigorous self-discipline and pervasive discontent. Her hair was a cascade of silver, meticulously secured in a severe chignon. Her pearls were unequivocally genuine. Her smile, however, was not. "So, this is the one?" she inquired, addressing Derek, not me. "Mom, this is Cassie, my wife," he responded. He uttered it with a discernible trace of pride, as if he had presented a prized trophy. Patricia extended 2 fingers for a handshake. I clasped them gently, as though I feared inadvertently causing her to fracture. This was my strategy back then. I cultivated an image of being small, demure, and utterly unthreatening. My performance was paramount. "Well," Patricia remarked, withdrawing her hand as if it were soiled, "I suppose congratulations are in order." Dinner proved even more trying. We convened in the dining room, Derek presiding at one extremity of the expansive mahogany table, Patricia at the opposite, and I positioned centrally, much like a defendant undergoing interrogation. The meal, catered, consisted of roast chicken, asparagus, and fingerling potatoes. I offered praise for every dish. Patricia, however, remained impassive. It was not until dessert that she finally addressed me directly. "Cassie, dear, what is it you do again?" "I'm a writer," I replied softly, reiterating the fabrication I'd fed Derek. "Freelance, articles, essays, that sort of thing." "How quaint." She delicately dabbed her mouth with a linen napkin. "And does it prove lucrative?" "Not particularly, but I find satisfaction in it." "I see." Patricia leaned back in her chair, appraising me. "So, my son has married a charity case." The atmosphere in the room became taut. Derek remained silent. He didn't even lift his gaze from his plate. "Derek has always possessed a compassionate nature," Patricia continued, her voice a silken whisper laid over brittle glass. "He has a predilection for rescuing things, stray animals, struggling artists." Her gaze met mine with unwavering intensity. "You are fortunate he even considered you, my dear." I manufactured a smile. "I am aware of my good fortune. I am deeply grateful." "Good. You ought to be." She gracefully rose, signaling the conclusion of the meal. "Now, would you be so kind as to assist me with clearing the table? Derek and I need to confer on business matters." And with that simple dismissal, I was relegated to the kitchen, akin to household staff. I collected the plates, disposed of the uneaten portions in the refuse bin, and loaded the dishwasher, all while they conversed about investments and portfolios in the adjacent room. Derek's laughter intermittently echoed through the walls. He seemed entirely at ease here, within his element, within his mother's domain. I stood by the sink, hands submerged in soapy water, experiencing an absence of emotion. No indignation, no wounded pride, merely the cool, detached assessment of someone meticulously compiling notes for future reference. Before my departure that evening, I observed a subtle but significant detail. Patricia posed the same question to me on 3 separate occasions. "What did you say your name was again?" Each time, Derek gently corrected her. Each time, she feigned confusion, as if the information simply slid from her mind, much like water from glass. Early indicators, memory lapses, repetition. I committed this to memory. 2 months prior, preceding the nuptials, Derek had insisted upon a prenuptial agreement. We convened in his attorney's office, a polished partner at a prestigious downtown firm, and Derek expounded with unwavering certainty that the prenup would shield his assets from avaricious individuals. I affixed my signature without a moment's hesitation. However, I stipulated one condition. "I would prefer that we file our taxes separately," I stated. Derek's brow furrowed. "Why?" "I have a modest inheritance from my aunt," I elucidated, my voice tinged with an apologetic tone. "Approximately $200,000. It resides within a trust, and its stipulations necessitate separate filings to preserve its terms. It's a legal formality. I hope that is acceptable." Derek regarded me for a prolonged interval. Then, he chuckled. In fact, he laughed. $200,000. He shook his head, a grin spreading across his face. Cassie, I expend that much on client dinners. Keep your little nest egg. I do not wish for you to harbor the notion that I married you for financial gain. The attorney meticulously drafted the addendum. Derek, without perusing it, executed his signature. The prenuptial agreement incorporated a liquidated damages clause, stipulating a $5 million penalty for any breach of fraud or infidelity by either party, in addition to a complete division of marital assets in favor of the party who upheld the agreement. Standard verbiage, the attorney assured. Derek waved it off dismissively. It's not as though I intend to cheat or pilfer, he quipped. I offered a smile but remained silent. He believed he was safeguarding himself. He perceived the prenup as his bulwark, his insurance against a woman potentially interested in his wealth. He had no inkling that I was constructing a cage, and the tax filings. This was the key. Filing separate returns meant Derek would never have access to my tax returns, never see the $5 billion funneled through offshore companies and Delaware LLCs, never discover MC Ventures, never understand the empire I'd built while he was busy underestimating me. He looked at me and saw $200,000. Petty cash. An insignificant amount. I let him believe it. As we were walking back from Patricia's house that evening, Derek reached out and patted my knee reassuringly. You handled it admirably, darling. Mother can be formidable, but she'll come around. I responded with a nod, maintaining my role, the grateful wife, the beneficiary of charity. Yet, within my mind, my strategic planning was already 3 steps ahead. Patricia's animosity was more than mere unkindness. It was a valuable source of intelligence. It unequivocally demonstrated the modus operandi of this family, their treatment of those they deemed inferior, and how Derek had internalized mockery, choosing to perpetuate it rather than confront it. It provided me with all the necessary insight. Over the subsequent weeks, I visited Patricia twice weekly. I procured groceries, assisted with her gardening, and sat in her parlor, listening to her reminiscences of her late husband, of the residence she had inhabited for 4 decades, of Derek as a child. She never inquired about my life. She consistently failed to recall my name, yet she tolerated my presence due to my utility. Derek, meanwhile, visited perhaps twice annually, typically when he required something. I diligently kept records. I documented every interaction. I observed Patricia misplacing her keys, forgetting the current day, and recalling conversations from mere minutes prior. The signs were irrefutable. Early-stage Alzheimer's, most probable. Yet, Derek remained oblivious. He was too engrossed in advancing his career, pursuing his next lucrative deal, and maintaining a lifestyle he could not truly afford through expenditures beyond his means. Patricia was not the sole proprietor of a meticulously constructed facade. Derek maintained his own mask, and the city at large lauded him for it. December 2021. I witnessed my husband ascend to sainthood. Navy Pier in December is a spectacle of incandescent lights against the biting wind sweeping off Lake Michigan. The Chicago Children's Foundation had secured the Grand Ballroom for their annual gala, a quintessential black tie affair where the city's affluent convened to bask in a sense of self-satisfaction. Silent auction tables lined the periphery, offering coveted getaways to Aspen and exclusive dinners with celebrated Chicago Bulls players. A string quartet provided a gentle musical backdrop. Champagne flowed with unrestrained abundance, and at the epicenter of this milieu, illuminated by a spotlight on the stage, stood Derek. He was attired in a bespoke tuxedo, a Tom Ford creation, impeccably tailored. His hair was elegantly slicked back, his smile radiating effortless confidence. He embodied the quintessential successful investment banker, the benevolent philanthropist, the man who possessed everything and felt compelled to give back. The foundation's director introduced him with effusive commendation. Tonight, we have the distinct honor of welcoming Derek Blackwell, the visionary founder of the Blackwell Scholars Fund, an individual deeply committed to transforming lives through the power of education. The applause erupted instantaneously, a wave of thunderous appreciation. Derek approached the podium, and a hushed silence descended upon the assembly. "Thank you," he commenced, his voice imbued with warmth and a disarming humility. "I am unaccustomed to such public attention, but this evening is not about me, it is about the children." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to resonate. The audience leaned forward, captivated. "Every child deserves an opportunity," he continued. "I was afforded the privilege of a supportive upbringing, access to quality schooling, and invaluable resources. However, I am acutely aware that this is not the reality for the majority of young individuals in this city. Far too many exceptionally bright youths are denied the chance to realize their full potential due to insurmountable financial barriers to higher education." He shook his head, as if the very injustice caused him physical distress. "This is precisely why I have pledged $12 million over the forthcoming 5 years to facilitate the college education of 247 deserving students. These will be comprehensive scholarships, encompassing tuition, accommodation, meals, and educational materials. Everything. Because education serves as the ultimate equalizer. It is the mechanism by which we dismantle cycles of poverty. It is the foundation upon which we construct a more promising future." A spontaneous standing ovation ensued. Attendees rose to their feet, clapping, some dabbing their eyes. Subsequently, donors eagerly presented their checkbooks, eager to contribute. Local news crews meticulously documented every development. Derek engaged in handshakes, posed for photographs, and adeptly embodied the persona of the humble savior. I observed from the wings, just outside the camera's lens, offering a photogenic smile when the cameras momentarily shifted to me, the supportive spouse, the woman by her man's side. Yet, internally, my focus was on meticulous calculation. $12 million pledged, 247 students promised scholarships. And I harbored an absolute certainty, a profound conviction, that not a single one of these children would ever receive a cent. I had been observing Derek for over a year by this juncture, scrutinizing his methods, his propensity for eloquent pronouncements in public juxtaposed with entirely different actions in private. The Blackwell Scholars Fund was officially registered as a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization, necessitating the annual submission of Form 990 to the IRS, a public record accessible to anyone with the inclination to seek it out. I possessed that inclination. I engaged a forensic accountant, compensating him discreetly through one of my shell corporations, and tasked him with tracing every dollar that flowed through the fund. His findings revealed a pattern of textbook fraud. 95% of all donations were allocated to administrative costs, a deliberately vague designation on the IRS forms. This category encompassed salaries, office expenses, and consulting fees, terms that were intentionally broad and inflated, ultimately funneling funds into offshore accounts controlled by Derek. A meager 5% was directed towards genuine program expenditures, and even that was questionable. It constituted a few nominal donations to other charitable organizations and some promotional collateral. There was demonstrably nothing that actually assisted a single student in achieving their college aspirations. By the end of 2023, a full 2 years after that gala, the Blackwell Scholarship Fund had reportedly amassed over $12 million. Scholarships awarded, 0. I initiated the compilation of a comprehensive dossier. It included the names of 247 families contacted by Derek's organization. It contained donation receipts from well-intentioned donors. I kept the carefully fabricated expense reports Derek had submitted to the IRS. All the evidence was there, a trail of deception that could be followed. However, I needed more than just numbers. I needed to humanize the victims, people who could convincingly describe what Derek had stolen, thereby convincing a jury of his guilt. It was at this stage that I met Sophie Martinez. She was 17 years old, a senior at a high school on Chicago's South Side, when Derek's representatives contacted her in the spring of 2022. Sophie was an excellent student, maintaining a perfect 4.0 GPA and earning perfect SAT scores, and had been accepted to MIT to study biomedical engineering. Her high school counselor told her about the Blackwell Scholarship Fund. Derek himself showed up at the school, gave an inspiring speech about opportunity and potential, and ceremoniously presented Sophie with a certificate in front of the entire student body. The scholarship was worth $320,000 and covered 4 years of tuition, including tuition, room, and board. Sophie's mother, Maria, was overjoyed. They celebrated this monumental achievement, believing their lives were on the cusp of transformation. However, when Sophie arrived at MIT in August 2022 for orientation, the financial aid office had no record of the scholarship, no incoming payment, no communication whatsoever from the Blackwell Scholars Fund. Maria attempted to contact Derek's office 14 times, leaving voicemails and sending numerous emails, all without a response. They were given a mere 48-hour deadline to secure the tuition fees, or Sophie would forfeit her place at the university. Maria was forced to sell their family car. They secured a $50,000 loan from relatives. Sophie herself had to take out $80,000 in student loans just to cover her initial year of education. When Maria finally reached out to me via email, she had obtained my contact information through my purported involvement on a charity board as Derek's wife. Her message was concise yet devastating. "We sold our car to cover the shortfall. My daughter is now saddled with $80,000 in debt. Mr. Blackwell has irrevocably destroyed our family's future." Sitting in my home office, staring at my email, I felt a profound change within me. He didn't just steal money, he stole hope. He crushed cherished dreams. He looked these young people straight in the eye, promised them a bright future, and then callously disregarded his promise because it had no consequences. Sophie was not alone in this incident. By the end of 2023, I had identified 43 more families in the exact same predicament. These were students who had been guaranteed scholarships, ships, parents who made key financial decisions based on Derek's fictions, and their futures were irrevocably altered because a wealthy man desired the appearance of generosity without the reality of it. Most of these families felt powerless to resist the situation. They believed they were alone, that Derek was an untouchable figure. I was determined to show them they weren't alone and untouchable. I saved every email, every receipt, every fabricated expense report. I meticulously documented the $12 million raised and the actual scholarship funds. I meticulously crafted a legal case that would undoubtedly attract the attention of the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigation Division. A forensic accountant I hired meticulously tracked every dollar. 95% of these funds were transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and the Bahamas. Derek Hading skillfully created a shell company. Companies with deceptively vague names like Blackwell Educational Services LLC, Future Scholars Consulting Group, and Youth Opportunity Management Inc. were registered in Delaware. All were under Derek's complete control. All served as conduits for transferring donations to accounts to which only he had access. The remaining 5% consisted of symbolic donations, $5,000 to the local YMCA and $10,000 to a college scholarship fund. These amounts were strategically minimal, enough to lend the financial statements an illusion of legitimacy upon cursory examination, but no one had ever conducted such a thorough analysis. Donors placed their trust in Derek. The foundation implicitly trusted Derek. The IRS, too, trusted Derek. I, however, did not. By early 2024, I had amassed a file 3 inches thick, containing an exhaustive array of bank statements, wire transfer records, correspondence between Derek and his accountant detailing elaborate cost allocation strategies, Form 990 filings replete with inflated administrative expenses, and poignant testimonials from families who had been promised scholarships and received nothing. Nevertheless, I recognize that I could not achieve this objective single-handedly. I required an insider, an individual Derek trusted implicitly, someone who could infiltrate his inner circle and meticulously document every criminal act, every falsehood, and every instance of his cruelty. And I had encountered such an individual 7 years prior, standing at a grave that should never have existed. April 2017. The day I laid my dearest friend to rest was the day I came to understand the profound distinction between vengeance and justice. The Oakwood Cemetery sprawls across Chicago's South Side, an expanse of ancient oaks and time-worn headstones stretching as far as the eye can see. It had been drizzling that morning, a cold, penetrating spring rain that seeped through one's coat and settled deep within the bones. The sky was a somber gray, the trees were bare, and the entire landscape seemed steeped in a profound sense of desolation. Lily's pale oak casket was adorned with white lilies. The pastor spoke of God's plan and eternal rest, but I barely registered his words. My thoughts were consumed by the man who should have been in that box instead. Derek Blackwell. Lily Harper, my best friend, and I met in 3rd grade. We lived 3 blocks apart, attended the same high school, and were roommates at Northwestern. She was exceptionally brilliant, so much so that MIT accepted her for a master's in computational finance. For her thesis, she spent 2 years developing a proprietary trading algorithm. Investment firms were eager to acquire it even before her graduation. In 2015, Derek recruited her to Sterling & Chase. At 24, ambitious and eager to prove herself, she accepted. 6 months later, he stole her algorithm, claimed it as his own, and pocketed a $1.2 million bonus. When Lily attempted to seek recourse, he threatened to report her for insider trading, a crime she hadn't committed, but one she couldn't afford to defend herself against. He then convinced Sterling's partners she was unstable, leading to her termination in January 2016. Unable to find other employment due to falsified references from Sterling, Lily's prospects dimmed. On March 15, 2017, at 26 years old, Lily Harper walked into Lake Michigan and never returned. At the funeral, as most had departed, I heard footsteps. "You're Cassie," a voice stated. Turning, I saw a tall, lean man with dark hair and red-rimmed eyes, bearing Lily's sharp cheekbones and serious expression. "I'm Ethan," he introduced himself, Lily's brother. He had been in Boston, involved in private equity, and was absent during the crisis. "I know what happened," Ethan said quietly. "Lily told me everything before she—" He trailed off. "Derek Blackwell killed her as surely as if he'd pushed her off a bridge." "I know," I replied. "Then help me make him pay." I should have hesitated, but I didn't. "How much are we talking about?" "A lawsuit he'll settle and move on." "I want more than that," Ethan stated. "I want him ruined. I want him in prison. I want everyone to know what he is." Gazing at Lily's grave with its fresh soil and wilting flowers, I made a decision that would shape the next 7 years of my life. "Then we can't just sue him for what he did to Lily," I said. "We need to prove he's done this before, that he'll do it again. We need to build a federal case so airtight he can't escape." "What kind of case?" "RICO, racketeering. It's a federal statute designed to take down organized crime, but it works for corporate fraud too. The key is proving a pattern of criminal activity over time. One crime isn't enough. We need to show he's been doing this for years to multiple victims. Ethan's jaw tightened. How long will that take? Years. Maybe 7. Maybe more. I met his eyes. The FBI will need time to build the case. We'll need to document every crime, every victim, every dollar he steals. And we'll need to let him keep committing crimes so we have enough evidence to trigger RICO penalties. You want me to watch him hurt more people and do nothing? I want you to document it, I said. I want you to get close enough that he trusts you, close enough that he tells you everything. And when the time comes, we'll use that trust to destroy him. Ethan stared at the grave for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. 7 years. But when the day comes, I want to be there. We shook on it. Standing over Lily's grave in the rain with the dirt still fresh, that's where the plan began. Over the next hour, we mapped it out. Ethan would infiltrate Derek's world, becoming his friend, his confidant, his eyes and ears inside Sterling and Chase. I would build the financial trap from the outside, and we'd work with the FBI to gather evidence under federal surveillance warrants. But there was one piece missing. I need to marry him, I said. Ethan looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. You need to what? Marry him. It's the only way this works. I ticked off the reasons on my fingers. 1. I need a legal excuse to file taxes separately so I can hide my assets. 2. I need a prenup with a fraud penalty clause that only triggers if he commits crimes during the marriage. 3. I need access to his home, his files, his mother's estate. 4. I need the FBI to have justification for long-term surveillance. A wife cooperating with a federal investigation, that's gold. How long? 4 years, maybe more. The charity fraud alone will take 2 years to develop. He has to launch the fund, collect donations, and fail to deliver scholarships. That's a timeline we can't rush. Add in the embezzlement, the Klaus operation, the forensic accounting. It all takes time. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That's a hell of a sacrifice." "It's not a sacrifice if it works." I looked at Lily's headstone. She deserves more than a settlement check. She deserves to know Derek Blackwell spent the rest of his life in a federal prison. And if he figures it out, if he suspects you, then I'll be ready. Ethan nodded slowly. All right. 7 years, 4 of them married to a monster, but we do it right. We do it so thoroughly that when it's over, there's nothing left of him. Agreed. A year later, in May 2018, Ethan accidentally met Derek at a private equity networking event. They talked business, bonded over deals. By 2019, they were inseparable. When I married Derek in August 2020, Ethan was his best man. Derek never knew Lily had a brother. She'd only worked at Sterling for 6 months, not long enough for him to learn about her family. And Ethan had been in Boston back then. By the time he moved to Chicago in 2018, Derek had already forgotten Lily existed, but we hadn't forgotten. And for 7 years, we built the cage around him 1 bar at a time. 4 years into the operation, we needed a catalyst, something to make Derek desperate enough to confess on record. That's when I invented Klaus Vandenberg. June 2023, I became a ghost investor from Switzerland, and Derek never saw it coming. I was sitting in my home office on a Wednesday morning, headset on, laptop open, staring at the VoIP software on my screen. It was 10:47 a.m. Derek was at Sterling and Chase. Ethan had texted me 15 minutes earlier to confirm. The office was 5 miles away, but it might as well have been another planet. Derek had no idea that the woman he thought was home writing a blog post was about to become a Swiss billionaire named Klaus Vandenberg. I'd spent 18 months building Klaus. Not just a name, but an entire world. A life. A legend. It started with the website, vandenbergcapital.ch. Clean, professional, minimalist design. the kind of site that screams old money. I hired a Zurich-based web developer, paid him through one of my shell companies, and had him hosted on Swiss servers. The site featured a portfolio of select investments, all of them fabricated but plausible. Tech startups in Singapore, renewable energy projects in Germany, a luxury hotel chain in Dubai. I created performance reports showing 22% annual returns from 2015 to 2023. Solid, but not flashy. Klaus wasn't a gambler, he was a strategist. Next, the media presence. I paid for native advertising, what Forbes and Bloomberg call sponsored content, and planted 3 articles over the course of a year. Short profiles, nothing too detailed. Klaus Vandenberg, the private equity titan you've never heard of. How one Swiss investor made billions by staying off the radar. The kind of articles that made Klaus sound exclusive, elusive, and very, very rich. Then, I built the physical infrastructure. I rented a serviced office at Paradeplatz 8, right in the heart of Zurich's financial district. UBS and Credit Suisse had headquarters within a 5-minute walk. The office came with a receptionist, Anna, who worked for the building's management company and had no idea she was part of an elaborate con. If Derek's assistant called to verify Vandenberg Capital's address, Anna would answer, "Vandenberg Capital AG, how may I direct your call?" I created a LinkedIn profile with 500 connections. I bought aged accounts, people who'd been on LinkedIn for years, and had them endorse Klaus for venture capital, private equity, and strategic investments. I hired a graphic designer on Fiverr to create a professional headshot. A silver-haired man in his 60s, wearing a navy suit, looking dignified and slightly bored. The photo was a composite generated by AI. Klaus didn't exist, but his face did. The final piece was the voice. I hired a Swiss voice actor, a man in his 50s with a thick Zurich accent, and had him record 2 hours of sample phrases. Then I used AI voice synthesis software to create a deep-fake voice model. The technology had come a long way by 2023. With a 2-second latency, I could type responses in real time, and the software would speak them in Klaus's voice. To Derek, it would sound like a live phone call. To me, it was a script. The whole operation cost me about $200,000. For most people, that's a fortune. For someone managing $5 billion, it was the best investment I ever made. On June 15th, I made the first call. I routed it through a VoIP server in New York, a one-party consent state, which meant I could legally record the conversation without Derek's knowledge. I pressed call and waited. 3 rings, then Derek's voice, smooth and confident. "Derek Blackwell," I typed into the text box. The AI spoke. "Mr. Blackwell, this is Klaus Vandenberg calling from Zurich. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." There was a pause. I could almost hear Derek's brain working. Zurich, Vandenberg, money. "Not at all," Derek said. "What can I do for you? I've been following your work at Sterling and Chase with great interest. I'm looking to deploy $50 million into a high-growth partner in the U.S. market. Your colleague, Ethan Harper, recommended you. Are you interested?" Another pause, longer this time. $50 million, Derek said carefully. "That's significant. Can I ask how you heard about me?" "Ethan and I go back several years. We were on a panel together in Singapore. When I mentioned I was looking for a US-based partner, he suggested I speak with you." All lies, but Derek didn't know that. "I appreciate the referral," Derek said. "But I have to be honest, I don't typically take calls without a video conference or in-person meeting first. How do I know you're who you say you are?" "I've been waiting for this," I typed. "Mr. Blackwell, I understand your caution, but you should know I value discretion above all else. My clients include sovereign wealth funds and family offices who demand absolute privacy. I don't do video conferences. I don't meet new partners until after the first $50 million is deployed. If that's not acceptable, I have a waitlist of qualified investors. I'm offering you first position because Ethan spoke highly of you, but if you'd prefer to pass, I understand. The scarcity play, the exclusivity angle, the subtle threat that he might miss out. Let me talk to Ethan, Derek said. I'll get back to you. Of course. But Derek, this line is encrypted. Nobody else is listening. In our world, discretion is everything. I hung up. 20 minutes later, Ethan texted me. He's calling, ready for phase 2. That day, Derek met Ethan for lunch at a steakhouse in the Loop. Ethan played his part perfectly. He showed Derek a fabricated wire transfer receipt, a photoshopped document showing the transfer of $5 million from the Harper Family Trust to Vandenberg Capital AG. He told Derek that he had flown to Zurich the previous month to tour Klaus's office and his team. He's a real professional, Ethan said. He manages $2 billion, but he keeps it under wraps. That's why you haven't heard of him. This guy doesn't talk to the press, doesn't make videos, doesn't do anything that would leave a trace. But his track record speaks for itself. Derek believed him implicitly. 5 days later, Klaus called again. Derek, I need to move quickly. I'm prepared to wire $50 million to your fund by August, but I need assurances. Can you show me your personal portfolio performance? Derek hesitated. Then, because greed is a hell of a drug, he said, Klaus, I'll be honest with you. My official returns are solid, but I've been creative with some off-book opportunities, client funds, high-yield private deals. The firm doesn't need to know. I typed nothing. Let the silence hang. I appreciate your candor, Klaus finally said. Discretion is key in our business. Derek had just confessed to embezzling client funds on a recorded line. 3 minutes of audio, clear as day. I saved the file, backed it up to 3 different encrypted servers, sent a copy to the FBI contact I'd been working with for 2 years. But I didn't stop there. I needed more. I needed Derek to believe Klaus was real until the very end. I needed him desperate, reckless, and willing to do anything to close the deal. Over the next 6 months, Klaus became Derek's obsession, and with every call, Derek dug himself deeper. By December, Derek was drowning. I sat in my home office, headphones on, listening to the recording of Klaus's 15th call. It was late at night. Derek had called from his car, voice tight with desperation. Klaus, I need this deal to close. I've moved some funds around to show you I'm serious. 8 million ta high-yield opportunities, just like you asked for. But I need the 50 million wired by January, or I'm exposed. Moved some funds around. That was Derek speak for embezzled from 3 client accounts. I'd been running Klaus for 6 months by then, and every call had pulled Derek deeper into the trap. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, always dangling the carrot, always finding a reason to delay, always making Derek prove himself just a little bit more. The campaign began in August, a month after the first call. Klaus promised to transfer 50 million within 30 days. Then came the excuses. Swiss banking regulations required additional compliance checks. The Zurich office needed board approval for investments in the US. Klaus's legal team was drafting a partnership agreement. There's always an excuse, always an unavailable one. Derek believed every excuse because he had to. His gambling debts were piling up. I tracked them through a private investigator for 2 years. By mid-2023, he owed over $2 million to offshore bookmakers and Las Vegas casinos. He was desperate for a big score, and Klaus was dangling a $100 lifeline. In October, Klaus escalated. Derek, I need to see your preliminary financials, client portfolio breakdowns, performance metrics, asset allocations. I want to understand exactly where my capital will be deployed. Derek sent them. Real client data, names, account numbers, investment holdings. All of it confidential, all of it protected under federal law. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act makes it a federal crime for financial institutions to share customer information without consent. Derek had just handed me a smoking gun. I forwarded the files to the FBI within an hour. By December, Klaus had increased the stakes again. Derek, as I'm now considering $100 million, but I need you to prove your nerve. Show me you're willing to take risks. Show me you're not afraid. That's when Derek embezzled $8 million. Didn't steal it outright. He was smarter than that. Or at least the thought was. He created a fake private placement deal, told 3 of his wealthiest clients it was an exclusive opportunity, with guaranteed $28 million into an investment vehicle he controlled. A shell company registered in Delaware with Derek as the sole signatory. Ethan photographed the spreadsheet. Derek had been keeping meticulous records, dates, amounts, client names, account transfers. He thought he was being careful. He thought he'd cover his tracks once Klaus's money came through. He didn't realize Klaus would never send a dime. He didn't realize every wire transfer, every forged statement, every lie he told his clients was being documented by the FBI because I'd been working with the FBI for almost 3 years. It started in January 2021, 5 months after I married Derek. I'd walked into the Chicago field office on a cold Monday morning, asked to speak with someone in the Financial Crimes Division, and been introduced to Special Agent Sarah Reynolds. Reynolds was mid-40s, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. She'd spent 15 years taking down white-collar criminals, Ponzi schemes, insider trading, corporate fraud. When I laid out Derek's charity fraud plan, his gambling debts, and Patricia's trust, she listened without interrupting. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked when I finished. 4 years, since the day my best friend killed herself because of him. Reynolds studied me for a long moment. "You want a RICO case? I want him in federal prison for 20 years. I want asset forfeiture. I want him to lose everything. Then we need time. We need evidence of a pattern of criminal activity over multiple years. One crime isn't enough for RICO. We need to prove he's been doing this repeatedly, systematically." "I can give you 7 years," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "That's a hell of a commitment." "He destroyed my best friend. He's going to destroy 247 families with his fake charity. And if I don't stop him, he'll destroy more. So, yes, 7 years." Reynolds opened a case file that day. By March, she'd secured a Title III wiretap warrant from the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. Under federal law, Title III allows law enforcement to intercept wire and oral communications if there's probable cause a crime is being committed. Ethan started wearing a wire in April 2021. Every conversation with Derek, every lunch, every golf outing, every late-night drink was recorded under federal authority. Derek's office phone at Sterling and Chase was monitored under the company's workplace surveillance policy, which he'd signed without reading in 2014. And every Klaus call I made was captured under the Title III warrant because Derek was the target of an ongoing federal investigation. Federal law supersedes state law. Illinois requires 2-party consent for recordings, but a federal wiretap warrant overrides that. Every word Derek said was admissible in court. By January 2024, I had 18 months of Klaus recordings, 3 years of Ethan's wire recordings, and documented evidence of charity fraud, embezzlement, unauthorized disclosure of client data, and securities fraud. I met Agent Reynolds at a cafe in the Loop on a gray January afternoon. I slid a USB drive across the table. 18 months of recordings, I said. Embezzlement, charity fraud, client data theft, everything you need for a RICO indictment. Reynolds picked up the drive. RICO requires a pattern of racketeering activity. You've documented 7 years. That's more than enough. When do you arrest him? When do you want us to? I didn't hesitate. August 12th, 2024. My 4th wedding anniversary. He's throwing a party, 150 people, rooftop venue, all his investors and board members. I want him to feel safe first. I want him surrounded by everyone he's tried to impress. And then I want it all to come crashing down. Reynolds was quiet for a moment, then she nodded. If we arrest him at the party in front of his board, his investors, his colleagues, he'll have nowhere to hide. No lawyer can spin that. And the Sterling partners will cooperate to save their own skins. The optics work in our favor. So you'll wait. We'll wait, I said. Not because you're in charge, but because the plan makes tactical sense. She leaned forward. But understand this. Once we move, it's over. He'll be arraigned within 24 hours. Federal charges, no bail. Are you ready for that? I've been ready for 7 years. The FBI agreed to wait. They'd arrest Derek the day after the party, giving me 24 hours to execute the final phase. But before that could happen, I needed to secure Patricia's estate because Derek was about to lose everything. And when a desperate man loses his money, his reputation, and his freedom, he goes after whatever's left. In Derek's case, that meant his mother's $4.2 million estate. Patricia was the key. If Derek lost his fortune, he'd liquidate her assets to stay afloat. He'd sell her house, drain her accounts, cash out her late husband's pension. And Patricia, whose memory was slipping, whose trust in her son was absolute, would never see it coming. I couldn't let that happen. So in August 2020, just weeks after I married Derek, I made a move he never saw coming. August 2020. 6 days after I became Derek's wife, I started dismantling his future. I sat in the waiting room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, watching Patricia Blackwell forget she'd asked me the same question 3 times in 10 minutes. Why are we here again, dear? Your doctor's appointment, Patricia, the neurologist. Oh, right. She nodded, smoothed her skirt, looked out the window. 2 minutes passed. Why are we here? I'd been expecting this. I'd been visiting Patricia twice a week since Derek and I started dating in the fall of 2019. Groceries, garden work, listening to her stories about her late husband, about Derek as a boy, about the house in Oak Park she'd lived in for 40 years. Derek visited maybe twice a year, usually when he needed something. By the summer of 2020, Patricia was forgetting names, repeating questions, losing track of time. I suggested she see a specialist. She agreed not because Derek asked, but because I did. Dr. Harold Winters was in his early 60s, silver-haired and methodical. He led Patricia into his office while I waited outside. 40 minutes later, he called me in. Patricia sat in the chair across from his desk, hands folded, looking small and confused. Mrs. Blackwell, Dr. Winters said gently, I've completed a cognitive assessment. Your score on the mini mental state examination was 27 out of 30. That indicates mild cognitive impairment. Combined with the symptoms you've described, memory loss, difficulty with daily tasks, confusion about time and place, I'm diagnosing you with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. Patricia's face went blank. She didn't cry. She just stared at him. What does that mean? She asked quietly. It means your condition will progress. There's no cure, but there are medications that can slow the decline. More importantly, now is the time to make legal arrangements. Powers of attorney, healthcare directives, estate planning. You still have legal capacity to make those decisions, but that window won't stay open forever. Patricia looked at me. Cassie, I don't understand. What do I need to do? We'll figure it out together, I said. After the appointment, I drove Patricia back to Oak Park. She was quiet most of the way, staring out the window. When we pulled into her driveway, she didn't get out right away. Cassie, she said, voice small. I need to tell you something. What is it? Derek's been asking me to co-sign loans. He says it's for business, but I've seen the credit card bills, the casino receipts. He's gambling, isn't he? I didn't lie. Yes. His father left me everything when he died. The house, the pension, the savings. I don't want Derek to lose it all. She turned to me, eyes wet. I don't trust my own son with money. Does that make me a terrible mother? No, I said. It makes you smart. Will you help me? I don't know what to do. I know an attorney who specializes in estate protection. We can set up a trust to make sure your assets are safe, no matter what happens. Would you like me to arrange a meeting? Patricia nodded, relieved. I'd trust you with my life before I'd trust Derek with $1. I'd been building this relationship for over a year. Groceries, garden work, listening. Derek thought I was being a dutiful daughter-in-law. He had no idea I was laying the groundwork to cut off his last escape route. 4 days later, on August 22nd, Patricia and I sat in the offices of Campbell and Associates, a small estate planning firm in downtown Chicago. Margaret Campbell was 58, sharp-eyed, professional. She'd been practicing estate law for 30 years, and she represented Patricia, not me. Dr. Winters was there too, at my request. Margaret had asked him to provide a medical certification confirming Patricia's capacity during what he called a lucid interval, a period of clarity common in early-stage Alzheimer's patients. Margaret walked Patricia through the documents slowly, patiently. Mrs. Blackwell, I'm going to explain what we're signing today. This is an irrevocable trust. That means once you sign it, you cannot change or cancel it. The trust will hold your house, your investments, and your late husband's pension, approximately $4.2 million. Cassie Monroe will serve as trustee, which means she'll manage these assets for your benefit. Do you understand? Yes, Patricia said clearly. Why do you want to set up this trust? Because my son has a gambling problem. I'm afraid if I leave everything to him, he'll lose it. I want to make sure I'm taken care of, and I want someone I trust to manage my money. And you trust Cassie? More than I trust Derek. Patricia's voice was steady. She's been kinder to me in 1 year than he's been in 10. Margaret made notes, then she handed Patricia a pen. Before you sign, she cautioned, I need to ask. Is anyone pressuring you to do this? Do you feel coerced or threatened in any way? No, Patricia said. This is my decision. Dr. Winters leaned forward. Mrs. Blackwell, I've evaluated you today, and in my professional opinion, you have full legal capacity to execute these documents. You understand what you're signing and the consequences of your decision. Is that correct? Yes. We signed 3 documents that afternoon. An irrevocable trust, a durable power of attorney for healthcare naming me as Patricia's agent, and a durable power of attorney for finances also naming me. Margaret included a purpose statement in the trust document. This trust is established to protect the grantor's assets from potential creditor claims and to ensure proper management during any period of incapacity. Patricia also wrote a letter in her own hand, which Margaret notarized and filed with the trust. I am making this decision of my own free will. Derek is my son, but I do not trust him with money. Cassie has shown me more kindness in the past year than Derek has in many. I want her to protect my legacy. Margaret's assistant recorded the entire signing ceremony on video, standard practice for high-value estates. If Derek ever challenged the trust, we'd have ironclad proof Patricia knew exactly what she was doing. When it was over, Patricia hugged me. Thank you, she whispered. I hugged her back, but I didn't do this out of kindness. I did it because I knew what was coming. When Derek lost everything, his job, his money, his freedom, he'd try to drain Patricia's accounts to stay afloat. He'd sell her house, cash out her pension, leave her with nothing. But the trust was irrevocable. He couldn't touch a penny, and I controlled every dollar. Patricia deserved to be safe. But more than that, I needed Derek to have nowhere left to run. Over the next few months, I continued my twice-weekly visits. I paid Patricia's bills from the trust account. I hired a cleaning service. I arranged for a part-time caregiver when Patricia started forgetting to take her medications. Derek never asked about any of it. He assumed his mother was managing her own affairs, just as she always had. By 2024, Patricia's condition had deteriorated significantly. She moved to Sunrise Senior Living, a memory care facility for the elderly in Oak Park. The monthly rent was $12,000 paid from a trust fund. She no longer recognized him. She didn't recognize Derek when he rarely visited. But she was safe. She was cared for. And Derek couldn't touch a single dollar of the $4.2 million that kept her there. Derek still didn't know about the trust. And when the bills started piling up, he was about to get his first shock. March 2024. Derek finally discovered he had nothing left to steal. I was sitting in my home office when my phone rang. Derek. I let it ring twice before answering. I'd been waiting for this call for weeks. Cassie. His voice was tight, barely controlled. We need to talk. About what? About my mother. I just tried to wire money into her account to cover some medical bills, and the bank told me the account is locked. They said something about a trust. Do you know anything about this? I leaned back in my chair. A trust? No, I don't think so. Maybe your mom set something up years ago. Don't play dumb with me. The bank said the trustee is Cassie Monroe. That's you. Oh, I said, letting the surprise sound genuine. I didn't realize you didn't know. Didn't know what? Your mother asked me to help her set up an estate plan back in 2020. She was worried about, she was worried about her finances. She wanted to make sure everything was protected. Silence. Then, protected from what? From creditors. From bad decisions. Derek, your mom knew about your gambling. She knew about the debts. She didn't want to lose everything your father left her. You manipulated her, he said, voice rising. You got her to sign away her estate when she had dementia. She had early-stage Alzheimer's when she signed the trust. She was evaluated by Dr. Winters. She had full legal capacity, and she was represented by an independent attorney who made sure she understood exactly what she was doing. Who? Margaret Campbell. You can call her yourself. I'm sure she'll be happy to explain how ironclad that trust is. He hung up. I knew what came next. Derek would call Margaret, demand answers, threaten to sue. And Margaret would shut him down with the kind of calm professionalism that comes from 30 years of practice. I was right. 2 hours later, Derek called again. This time he was shouting. You conniving? You got my mother to sign over $4 million? You're a gold digger just like I always knew. Your mother asked me to help her, I said, keeping my voice steady. She trusted me to protect her assets. If you have a problem with that, take it up with a judge. I will. I'll take you to court. I'll prove you manipulated her. Good luck with that. Margaret has video of the signing. Dr. Winters certified your mother's capacity. And I have 4 years of receipts showing I've been paying every one of your mother's bills while you've been… Where, exactly? You visited her twice in 4 years, Derek. Twice. I've been paying $12,000 a month for her memory care at Sunrise. Where have you been? That's not… Where were you when she forgot my name? When she stopped recognizing her own house? When she needed 24-hour care because she couldn't remember how to use a phone? I've been working, providing for… You've been gambling and losing and stealing from your clients to cover your debts. Don't pretend this is about your mother. This is about you, realizing you can't use her money to save yourself. He hung up again. 3 days later, he showed up at the house. It was late afternoon, and I was in the kitchen when I heard the front door slam. Derek stormed in, face red, hands shaking. You think you're so smart, he said. You think you've won. I think your mother is safe. That's all I ever wanted. You wanted control. You wanted to make sure I had nothing. You had everything, Derek. A career, a reputation, your mother's love. You destroyed all of it yourself. He picked up a glass from the counter and hurled it at the wall. It shattered, shards scattering across the floor. I didn't flinch. I'd been preparing for this moment for 7 years. I knew Derek. He could hurt people with words, with money, with lies, but he'd never had the guts to actually hit someone. You're pathetic, I said quietly. What did you say? I said you're pathetic. You blame everyone else for your problems. Your mother, me, your clients, your colleagues. But the truth is, you're just a coward. You steal because you're too weak to earn anything honestly. You lie because you're too stupid to keep your story straight. And you're standing in my kitchen throwing tantrums because you finally realized you have nowhere left to run. He stared at me, breathing hard. Get out, I said. This is my house. Actually, it's not. Check the deed. I bought it 2 years ago through one of my companies. You've been living in my house, Derek, just like you've been living off my patience. But that ends tonight. I'll fight this. I'll fight the trust. I'll fight you. Go ahead. But you should know I've been documenting everything. Every bill I've paid for Patricia. Every decision I've made in her best interest. Every time you ignored her. I have 4 years of evidence proving I'm a better trustee than you ever were a son. So yes, hire a lawyer. Take me to court. Let a judge see exactly who you are. He left without another word. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the broken glass on the floor, and felt nothing but satisfaction. Derek thought Patricia's money was his backup plan. He thought when Klaus fell through, when his embezzlement caught up with him, when his charity fraud was exposed, he could liquidate his mother's estate and disappear. But I'd locked it down 4 years ago. Every dollar, every asset, every escape route. And now, with Klaus demanding results and the FBI closing in, Derek was about to make his most desperate move yet. 4 months later, on our 4th anniversary, he decided to humiliate me in front of everyone. He wanted to prove he didn't need me. What he didn't realize was, I'd been counting on that. August 12th, 2024. The night I had waited 4 years to arrive. Cindy's rooftop glittered like a jewelry box. String lights woven through steel beams cast a warm amber glow over white linen tables. And the Chicago skyline stretched out behind us, a backdrop of glass and ambition. 150 guests mingled beneath the open sky, champagne flutes catching the last light of sunset. Millennium Park sprawled below, the bean reflecting the city back at itself. Derek had chosen this venue. The Chicago Athletic Association rooftop was one of the most exclusive event spaces in the city, and he wanted everyone to know he could afford it. He'd spent $6,000 on a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. I'd spent $39.99 on a navy dress from Target. No one noticed the difference. I stood near the railing, watching him work the crowd. CFOs from competing firms, senior partners from Sterling and Chase, investors, charity donors who still believed in the Blackwell Scholarship Fund. He moved between them with practiced ease, shaking hands, laughing too loud, refilling his glass too often. By 7:30, he'd finished 4 whiskeys, I counted. He always drank when he was stressed, and tonight Derek Blackwell was drowning. Ethan stood across the terrace, nursing a club soda and nodding along to a conversation about market trends. His eyes flicked to mine. Once, brief, deliberate. I gave the smallest nod. James Caldwell, CEO of Sterling and Chase, stood near the bar, surrounded by 12 board members. I'd sent each of them a private message 2 weeks ago. A brief meeting after the party. Financial matter regarding Derek Blackwell. Attendance requested. They thought it was routine. They had no idea they were about to witness an execution. At 7:45, Derek stepped up to the small stage near the center of the rooftop. Someone handed him a microphone. The crowd quieted, faces turning toward him with polite curiosity. He swayed slightly, gripping the mic stand for balance. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice too loud, the edges slurred. "4 years ago, I made a decision. Some of you thought it was impulsive?" Scattered laughter. "But I knew what I was doing. I married a woman who needed me." My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not because I wanted to hear him humiliate me in front of 150 people, but because I needed him to. "Cassie's a good person," Derek continued, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "Kind, patient. But let's be honest, she's never been ambitious. She writes books no one reads. She clips coupons. She shops at Target." He paused, letting the judgment sink in. "I've given her everything. A home, a life, a name that means something in this city. And you know what? She's never once said thank you." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others smiled, uncertain whether this was a joke or something darker. Derek raised his glass. "Cassie, you've been dragging me down since day one. I thought I was rescuing you, but honestly, you're dead weight." Silence fell across the rooftop. Someone coughed. A waiter froze mid-step. I felt 150 pairs of eyes swing toward me, waiting for tears, for anger, for collapse. I felt none of those things. All I felt was satisfaction, because this was the moment Derek Blackwell gave me permission to destroy him. I set my champagne flute on the nearest table. The clink of glass against marble echoed louder than it should have. "Derek," I said, my voice calm, clear, and loud enough to carry across the terrace. "I think we need to talk, but not here. Downstairs, in the boardroom." He blinked, surprised. "What?" "Downstairs, in the boardroom." I turned to James Caldwell and the 12 board members standing near the bar. "Gentlemen, I believe you received my message. If you'll join us, please." James frowned but nodded. The board members exchanged glances, confused, curious, but obedient. When the CEO moves, they follow. Derek laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "What is this, Cassie? You want to beg me to stay? Fine. Let's get this over with." I didn't answer. I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Behind me, I heard the scrape of chairs, the murmur of voices. Derek followed, stumbling slightly. So did Ethan. So did James. So did all 12 board members. They thought I was about to apologize. They had no idea. The elevator ride down was silent. Derek stood beside me, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't ask what I wanted. He didn't need to. He was angry, humiliated, and drunk enough to think he could still intimidate me. He was wrong. The boardroom was on the 3rd floor, a long, windowless space with a mahogany table, leather chairs, and a projection screen at the far end. I'd reserved it 3 weeks ago. The hotel staff had set it up exactly as I'd requested. Folders at each seat, a laptop connected to the projector, a pitcher of water on the table. I stepped inside and held the door open. One by one, they filed in. Derek, Ethan, James. 12 board members in tailored suits, their expressions ranging from confusion to concern. Derek slumped into the chair at the head of the table. "What the hell is this, Cassie?" I closed the door, then I locked it. The click echoed through the room. "This," I said quietly, "is the end." Derek laughed. "The end of what?" "Of you." I walked to the front of the room and opened the laptop. The projection screen flickered to life, and Derek's face appeared, frozen mid-sentence in a video call, lips moving, voice muted. Below the image, a timestamp, June 15, 2023. Below that, a caption, Klaus Vandenberg, first contact. Derek's expression shifted. Confusion, recognition, panic. James Caldwell leaned forward. What is this? I pressed play. The boardroom was ready. The evidence was lined up. And for the first time in 4 years, I was about to stop pretending. All right. Before I walk into that room and tear down every lie Derek ever told, I need to know you're still with me. Drop the word justice in the comments below. Quick heads up, parts of this story are fictionalized to illustrate a deeper truth. If you're not into that, feel free to click away now. But if you want to see karma hit hard, stick around. The boardroom felt smaller than it was. 15 people sat around a mahogany table that could have seated 20, but the silence made the walls press inward. Leather chairs, dim recessed lighting, a projection screen at the far end, blank and waiting. Derek slumped at the head of the table, arms crossed, jaw tight. Ethan sat 2 chairs down, his face unreadable. James Caldwell occupied the seat to my right, leaning forward with his hands folded. The 11 board members of Sterling and Chase filled the remaining chairs, CFOs, senior partners, men in tailored suits who'd spent the last hour drinking champagne and congratulating my husband. Now they looked confused, concerned, but not yet alarmed. I stood at the front of the room, laptop open, remote control in hand. Derek broke the silence first. Cassie, what the hell is this? If you want to embarrass me. I cut him off. Sit down, Derek. He blinked, startled by the sharpness in my voice. Then he sat. I took a breath and turned to face the room. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. I know this is unusual, but I have information that directly impacts Sterling and Chase's fiduciary responsibility to its clients. What I'm about to show you is evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and illegal activity conducted by Derek Blackwell over the past 7 years. Derek laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. Cassie, what are you talking about? You don't know anything about my business. I clicked the remote. The projection screen flickered to life. MC Ventures LLC Portfolio Overview. Assets under management, $5.2 billion. Portfolio companies, 47 sectors, fintech, biotech, SaaS, clean energy, average annual return, 28%. Founder and CEO, Cassie Monroe. The room went silent. Derek stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. That's impossible. You're a writer. You don't have money. I've been a billionaire longer than I've known you, Derek. My voice was calm, steady. MC Ventures, my initials. I built it from nothing over 15 years. I started with a single angel investment when I was 23, a fintech startup that went public and netted me $42 million. I rolled that into venture capital, built a portfolio, and never stopped. And for the past 4 years, I've been watching you, documenting you, waiting for this moment. James Caldwell leaned forward, his expression shifting from confusion to sharp focus. Mrs. Blackwell, are you saying you have evidence of wrongdoing? I have 3 years of FBI recordings, 7 years of financial records, and testimony from 247 victims of Derek's charity fraud. I've been working with the FBI since January 2021. They have it all. The recorded calls, the offshore transfers, the falsified expense reports. It's over, Derek. Derek shot to his feet, his chair shrieking against the floor. This is insane, Ethan. Tell them. Tell them she's lying. Ethan rose slowly, his eyes fixed on Derek. His voice was low, chilling. I can't do that, Derek, because everything she said is true, and I've been helping her document it for the last 7 years. Derek staggered back. What, Ethan? You're my best friend. No. Ethan's voice sliced through the room. I was never your friend. I'm Lily Harper's brother. Remember her? The analyst whose algorithm you stole back in 2015. The woman you destroyed. She was my sister, Derek. And she killed herself because of you. Derek's color drained. I met you at that private capital event in May 2018. Ethan continued. You didn't recognize my last name because Lily and I had different fathers. You thought I was just another investor looking for connections. You invited me to dinners, golf, your wedding. You trusted me, and I spent 7 years recording every word you said, every crime you committed, every lie you told. Derek's hands trembled. You set me up. No, Ethan said quietly. You set yourself up. I just made sure there was a record. I clicked the remote again. A video appeared on the screen. Derek's face, frozen mid-sentence. His lips moving, his expression eager. Below the image, June 15, 2023, Klaus Vandenberg, first contact. I pressed play. Klaus's voice filled the room, smooth, with a German accent, artificially generated. Mr. Blackwell, I've been following your work for some time. I'm interested in discussing a private placement opportunity. $50 million. Are you available to talk? Derek's voice followed, unguarded and hungry. $50 million, absolutely. What do you need from me? I paused the video and turned to James Caldwell. Klaus Vandenberg doesn't exist. I created him. I built a website, planted articles in the Financial Times and Bloomberg, rented a serviced office in Zurich, and used AI voice synthesis to make Derek believe he was talking to a real investor. It took 18 months and $200,000, and Derek never once verified his identity. James's expression hardened. What did he tell this Klaus? I clicked forward through the recordings. Derek's voice played in fragments, stitched together like a confession. I moved $8 million from 3 client accounts into a private placement vehicle. The charity fund, it's a shell. We've raised $12.4 million, but 0 scholarships have been awarded. I can get you client data, proprietary trading algorithms, whatever you need. The room was silent. One of the board members, a gray-haired man in his 60s, set down his pen. Jesus Christ. James Caldwell turned to Derek, his face carved from stone. Is this true? Derek's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me, then at Ethan, then at the screen. I can explain. No, James said quietly. You can't. I clicked to the next slide. Blackwell Scholarship Fund, financial summary. Total funds raised, $12.4 million. Scholarships awarded, 0. Administrative costs, offshore accounts, $11.8 million. Families defrauded, 247. Beside the numbers, I'd included a photograph. A 17-year-old girl in a graduation cap, holding an acceptance letter. Below it, a caption, Sophie Martinez, MIT class of 2027, promised $320,000 received, 0. Sophie's mother sold the family car and borrowed $80,000 in loans because Derek promised a full scholarship. I said quietly, she's one of 247 families who trusted him, who believed in him, who are now buried in debt because he stole their hope. Derek sank into his chair, his face ashen. I looked around the room at James, at the 11 board members, at Ethan. I didn't do this for revenge. I did it because Lily Harper deserved justice, because Sophie Martinez and 246 other families deserved justice, and because Derek Blackwell needed to be stopped. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black. Then I turned to Derek and said the words I'd been waiting 4 years to say. I clicked to the next slide. MC Ventures, corporate structure. The screen filled with a diagram, a sprawling network of entities connected by dotted lines, 47 portfolio companies, Delaware LLCs, Nevada trusts, offshore entities in the Cayman Islands and British Virgin Islands, each flagged with a small notation, FBR compliant. IRS Form 8938 filed. James Caldwell leaned forward, his eyes scanning the diagram. How long have you been building this? 15 years, I said. I started with one angel investment when I was 23, in a fintech startup that went public in 2012. I made $42 million. I invested it in venture capital and never stopped. By the time I met Derek, I was managing $3.8 billion in assets. Today, that's $5.2 billion. One of the board members, a silver-haired man named Richard Hayes, set down his pen. And he never knew? He never asked. I turned to Derek, who sat frozen in his chair, his face ashen. When we got married in August 2020, I insisted we filed taxes separately. I told you I had a small inheritance from my aunt, about $200,000. You laughed. You said it wasn't even worth your time. That was the first lie you believed. Derek opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I pressed the remote again. Derek Blackwell, debt portfolio acquired by MC Ventures, 2021-2024. Gambling debt, $2 million Vegas casinos overseas. Sports betting, secured consumer loans, $3 million secured by the estate of Patricia Blackwell. Now voidable due to revocable trust, unsecured. Consumer loans, $12 million. Private lenders with high rates. Credit card debt, $8 million. Chase, Amex, Citi, payday loans, $3,000. 0% interest lenders, APR 300. $28 million acquired by MC Ventures at 40 cents on the dollar. Total acquisition cost, $11.2 million, sir. The room went silent. For the past 3 years, I said, my voice calm and steady, I've been quietly buying up every dollar of debt Derek accumulated. Credit card companies, casinos, private lenders, they were all happy to sell to a debt collection firm. Derek didn't know it, but I control his entire financial life. A $28 million debt was bought out for $11.2 million. James Caldwell's jaw tightened. And the loans secured against Patricia's estate? Void, I said. The irrevocable trust I helped Patricia establish in August 2020 made those loans unenforceable. Derek thought his mother's $4.2 million estate was his safety net, but I locked it away before he could touch it. Derek surged to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. You had no right? I had every right, I said, my voice cutting through his protest. Patricia asked me to help her. She was terrified you'd drain her accounts to cover your gambling debts. She told me you'd already asked her to co-sign loans, so I introduced her to an independent attorney, had her evaluated by a neurologist, and helped her protect what was hers. It's all documented, legal, binding. I clicked to the next slide. Prenuptial agreement, liquidated damages clause. If either party commits fraud, embezzlement, or criminal activity during the marriage, penalty $5 million liquidated damages. Asset division, 100% of marital assets to the non-breaching party. Signed August 10, 2020. Witnessed by Margaret Campbell, Esquire, independent counsel. You insisted on a prenup, Derek, I said quietly. You thought you were protecting yourself. You didn't realize I'd included a fraud penalty clause. The moment you committed a crime, and you've committed dozens, this clause activated. $5 million in liquidated damages plus 100% of our marital assets, which means the condo, the car, the vacation home in Lake Geneva. All of it belongs to me. Ethan spoke for the first time since his revelation, his voice cold and flat. She owns your debts. She owns your assets. And according to the prenup, she owns your future. Derek turned to him, his face twisted with rage. You set me up. You lied to me for 7 years. I didn't lie, Ethan said. I just never told you the truth. I clicked again. MC Ventures stake in Sterling & Chase private investment firm. No SEC filing required. Acquired through 3 shell companies, 2021 to 2023. MC Ventures equity stake, 19% passive investment. Ethan Harper, via loan from MC Ventures, 8%. Combined friendly stake, 27%. Firm valuation 2024, $800 million. MC Ventures stake value, $152 million. The room erupted. James Caldwell stood abruptly. You own 19% of this firm? Through 3 separate holding companies acquired over 3 years, I said. I stayed below 20% to avoid triggering internal disclosure requirements. Ethan's stake, 8% held in a family trust, was financed by MC Ventures. Combined, we control 27%, more than any single partner at this table. Richard Hayes turned to Derek, his expression hard. Did you know about this? Derek shook his head mutely. James looked at me, his face unreadable. Why are you telling us this now? Because Derek Blackwell is a criminal. I said. He's embezzled client funds, defrauded 247 families, stolen intellectual property, and violated federal securities law. And for 7 years, he's done it under your roof. You deserve to know what kind of man you've been protecting. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. Why? Why did you do this? I turned to face him fully, letting him see the woman he'd underestimated for 4 years. Because 7 years ago, you destroyed my best friend. Lily Harper was 26 years old. She had a future. She had dreams. And you stole them because you're a thief, a liar, and a coward. You fabricated insider trading charges to cover your own crime. You ruined her reputation. You made it impossible for her to find work. And when she couldn't take it anymore, she walked onto the Michigan Avenue Bridge and jumped. My voice didn't waver. She was my best friend, Derek. My college roommate. My sister in every way that mattered. And you killed her. Not with a gun. Not with your. Were you spying on me for 7 years? Ethan met his gaze without flinching. Every single day, every conversation, every crime you committed, I documented. I clicked the remote. Ethan Harper surveillance file, 2018 to 2024. Audio recordings, 847 hours. FBI Title III warrant, legally admissible financial document. Photographs 2, 340 images, video recordings, 63 clips recorded via phone during meetings with Derek. Embezzlement admissions, 19 documented instances. Charity fraud discussions, 34 documented instances. Wire fraud. Klaus Vandenberg calls, 6 recorded conversations. GLBA violations, client data breaches, 8 documented instances. The room went silent. Richard Hayes leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. 847 hours. 7 years. Ethan said quietly. Derek invited me into his office, into his home, into his private deals. He told me everything because he thought I was his best friend. But I was never his friend. I was Lily's brother. And every single day for 7 years I thought about what he did to her. How he stole her work. How he blackmailed her. How he destroyed her until she had nothing left. Derek's voice cracked. I didn't know she was your sister. I swear I didn't know. You never cared, Ethan said, his voice cold and flat. That's the problem. You never cared who you hurt. I clicked again. Lily Harper timeline. October 2015. Lily Harper, age 24, joined Sterling & Chase as financial analyst. December 2015. Lily develops proprietary trading algorithm based on MIT thesis. January 2016. Derek Blackwell steals algorithm, presents as his own work. February 2016. Derek receives $1.2 million bonus for his algorithm. January 30th, 2016. Lily confronts Derek. Derek fabricates insider trading charges. January 31st, 2016. Lily Harper terminated from Sterling & Chase. February to December 2016. Lily unable to find employment. Reputation destroyed. March 15th, 2017. Lily Harper dies by suicide, age 26. Michigan Avenue Bridge. April 2017. Cassie Monroe and Ethan Harper make blood oath at Lily's funeral. The photograph on the screen showed a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes, standing in front of the Chicago skyline. She was smiling. She looked happy. She looked like she had a future. James Caldwell stared at the screen, his jaw tight. She worked here. For 14 months, I said. She was brilliant. Top of her class at MIT. She'd written a thesis on high-frequency trading algorithms that caught the attention of half a dozen firms. Sterling & Chase hired her in October 2015. By December, she developed a proprietary algorithm that could predict market volatility with 87% accuracy. I turned to Derek. And you stole it. You took her work, presented it to the partners as your own, and collected a $1.2 million bonus. When Lily tried to report you, you fabricated insider trading charges and had her fired. You destroyed her reputation so thoroughly that no firm in Chicago would hire her. She couldn't get a job, couldn't pay her rent, couldn't see a future. My voice didn't waver. On March 15, 2017, Lily Harper walked onto the Michigan Avenue Bridge at 2 in the morning and jumped. She was 26 years old. The room was silent. Lily was my best friend, I continued, my college roommate at Northwestern, the smartest person I'd ever known. And Derek didn't just steal her work, he stole her life. So Ethan and I decided we would make him confess. We would document every crime, and we would make sure the whole world knew exactly what kind of man he is. Derek's face had gone gray. He looked at Ethan, then at me, then back at the photograph on the screen. I didn't mean for her to, he started. Yes, you did, Ethan said quietly. Maybe not consciously, but you knew what you were doing. You knew she'd lose her job. You knew no one would hire her. You knew you were destroying her. You just didn't care. James Caldwell cleared his throat. Mrs. Blackwell, I need to understand how much of this evidence is admissible in court. All of it, I said. The FBI issued a Title III wiretap warrant in January 2021. Federal law supersedes Illinois' two-party consent law. Every recording Ethan made under that warrant is legally admissible. Plus, Derek's office phone was covered under Sterling & Chase's workplace monitoring policy, which he signed in 2014. The company has the right to record any call made from a company line. I clicked to the next image, a signed document with Derek's signature at the bottom. And the Klaus Vandenberg calls, I continued. Those were routed through New York, a one-party consent state. Every word Derek said is evidence. One of the board members, a younger man named David Walsh, spoke for the first time. What about the videos? Recorded on Ethan's phone during meetings he attended with Derek, I said. 63 clips over 7 years. Derek invited Ethan to strategy sessions, client meetings, private dinners. Ethan recorded everything, and every single recording was made with FBI authorization. David looked at Ethan. You wore a wire for 7 years? No, Ethan said. I wore a wire for my sister. Derek surged to his feet, his chair clattering backward. This is entrapment. You set me up. Entrapment requires law enforcement to induce someone to commit a crime they wouldn't otherwise commit, I said calmly. You were already embezzling funds, defrauding charities, and stealing client data before Ethan ever met you. He didn't make you do anything, Derek. He just made sure there was a record. Derek's hands were shaking. Why go through all this? Why not just turn me in 7 years ago? Because a civil lawsuit wouldn't have been enough, I said. You would have settled, paid a fine, moved to another firm, and in 5 years, you'd be doing the same thing to someone else. We needed a federal case, a RICO prosecution, a pattern of criminal activity spanning multiple years and multiple victims. We needed you to bury yourself so deeply that you'd never get out. I stepped closer. And you did, Derek. You buried yourself. Every lie you told, every dollar you stole, every family you defrauded, Ethan and I just made sure someone was watching. James Caldwell stood slowly. Mrs. Blackwell, what happens now? I looked at the 15 faces around the table. Board members, partners, men who'd worked alongside Derek for years. Now, I said. Now you see the rest. But the recordings were just the beginning. Derek thought the prenup protected him. He had no idea I'd rewritten the rules of the game. I clicked to the next slide. Prenuptial agreement, August 10, 2020. Signed. 2 days before wedding, August 12, 2020. Drafted by Paul Winters, Esquire, Derek Blackwell's attorney. Reviewed by Margaret Campbell, Esquire, Cassie Monroe's independent counsel. Derek insisted on a prenup. I said, turning to face the room. He was terrified I'd take his money in a divorce, so I agreed, but I added a clause buried on page 11, paragraph 4. Derek's attorney read it. Derek didn't. I clicked again. Clause 11.4, liquidated damages for fraud. In the event that either party engages in financial fraud, embezzlement, or material misrepresentation during the marriage, the breaching party shall pay liquidated damages of $5,000 to the non-breaching party in addition to a division of 100% of marital assets in favor of the non-breaching party. Derek stared at the screen, his face draining of color. I know, I said evenly, because you never actually read it. You signed without looking because you were convinced I had nothing to protect. But here's what you failed to understand, Derek. Fraud isn't only about deceiving me. It's deceiving clients, misleading investors, lying to the government. And you've been doing exactly that for 7 years. I clicked to the next slide. Prenuptial enforcement breakdown. Liquidated damages. $5,000 marital assets eligible for division. Derek's equity share in Sterling & Chase, $3,200,000. Recoverable balance from the Blackwell Scholarship Fund, $1,100,000. Shared home equity, $800,000. Joint financial accounts, $200,000 total marital assets. $5,300,000 awarded entirely to Cassie Monroe. Total prenup settlement, $10,300,000. One of the board members, Richard Hayes, leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the figures. $3.2 million in equity? He asked. Derek owns 0.4% of Sterling & Chase, I explained. At an $800 million valuation, that stake equals $3.2 million. And as of tonight, that equity belongs to me, along with the remaining $1.1 million in the Blackwell Scholarship Fund Derek hasn't siphoned away yet, plus our home in Lincoln Park. Derek's voice came out thin, almost inaudible. You can't do this. I absolutely can, I replied calmly. And I already am. But we're not finished. I pressed the remote again. Debt Acquisition Report. MC Ventures purchased $28 million of Derek's debt for $11.2 million at 40 cents on the dollar. As the new creditor, MC Ventures now holds the authority to demand immediate repayment or seize collateral. Remaining assets subject to collection. Salary from Sterling & Chase, subject to wage garnishment. Personal vehicle, 2022 Porsche. 911, seized. Patricia Blackwell Estate Trust, $2 million. Inaccessible due to irrevocable restrictions. Net worth, after prenup enforcement and debt recovery, $17,700,000. You thought you were wealthy, Derek, I said softly. But the truth is, you've been bankrupt for the last 3 years. You just didn't realize it yet. I own your debt. I own your assets. And after tonight, I own what's left of your future. Derek dropped back into his chair, his hands visibly shaking. This can't be real. Richard Hayes turned toward me, setting his pen down carefully. Mrs. Blackwell, he said, I assume there's a reason you're presenting all of this to the board. There is, I answered. Because in roughly 5 minutes, FBI Special Agent Sarah Reynolds will walk through that door carrying an arrest warrant. I wanted all of you to see the evidence beforehand, because once Derek is gone, Sterling & Chase will need new leadership. I paused. And I'm prepared to invest $50 million in fresh capital, in exchange for a seat on the board and a commitment to compensate Derek's victims. The room fell silent. You want a board seat? James asked, stunned. I already own 19% of this company, I said. I could have demanded one years ago, but I waited. I wanted every one of you to understand exactly who Derek Blackwell really is before I stepped forward. I turned to face Derek. For 4 years, you treated me like I was insignificant, a struggling writer, dead weight, someone you could humiliate at dinner parties and dismiss in board meetings. But the truth is, Derek, I've been 10 moves ahead of you since the day we met. I held his gaze. I married you to destroy you. And tonight, I'm finally finishing what I started. Derek's expression cracked, anger and disbelief twisting across his face. Why? He asked, his voice breaking. Why go through all of this? Why not expose me 7 years ago? Because Lily Harper deserved more than a quiet settlement, I said. She deserved justice, real justice, the kind that puts you behind federal bars for 20 years, the kind that takes back every dollar you stole, every lie you sold, every life you destroyed. I took a slow step closer. So Ethan and I built a case, a federal RICO case, wire fraud, mail fraud, embezzlement, charity fraud, securities violations. We made certain every crime was documented, every transaction recorded, every piece of evidence fully admissible in court. My voice lowered, colder now. You killed my best friend, Derek. You stole her work, ruined her reputation, and pushed her toward suicide. Then, for 7 years, you repeated the same pattern with 247 other families. I looked directly at him. You're not just a thief. You're a predator. And tonight, the world is finally going to see it. Derek's face darkened with fury. You're insane, he snapped. You're... The boardroom door opened. A woman in a navy suit stepped inside, holding a black leather credential case. 2 agents and FBI windbreakers stood behind her in the hallway, silent and watchful. Special Agent Sarah Reynolds, FBI, she said, her voice calm, precise, authoritative. Her eyes settled on Derek. Derek Blackwell, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges including wire fraud, mail fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. Derek rose so quickly his chair nearly tipped over, the color draining from his face. This is a setup, he said sharply. I want a lawyer. You'll have the opportunity to contact legal counsel once we arrive at the field office, Agent Reynolds replied evenly. However, before we take you into custody, Mrs. Blackwell requested a few additional minutes. She glanced toward me. There's someone here who deserves to speak. I nodded once. Thank you, Agent Reynolds. She stepped aside near the entrance while the 2 agents remained stationed outside. James Caldwell turned toward me. Mrs. Blackwell, he said carefully, you mentioned there was one more person you wanted us to meet. Yes, I replied. Someone Derek harmed in the worst way imaginable. I crossed the room and opened the door. A young woman entered, followed by an older woman whose tired eyes and roughened hands told a lifetime of sacrifice. The younger one looked no older than 19 or 20. Dark hair tied back in a loose ponytail, an MIT sweatshirt, worn thin from countless washes. She carried herself with the quiet discipline of someone who had learned far too early that life rarely offers second chances. Gentlemen, I said, turning back to the board, I'd like you to meet someone. The young woman stepped forward. This is Sophie Martinez. I let the silence settle before continuing. 2 years ago, Derek promised Sophie a full scholarship to MIT through the Blackwell Scholarship Fund. She was valedictorian of her graduating class in South Chicago. Perfect 4.0 GPA. Perfect SAT score. I looked towards Sophie. She wanted to become a biomedical engineer. Sophie met Derek's eyes. He sat motionless now, pale and hollow-looking. You visited my school in spring 2022, she said quietly, though her voice never wavered. You gave a speech about how education changed your future. You said you wanted kids like me to have the same chance. She swallowed once. You promised me $320,000 for 4 years at MIT. Tuition, housing, meals, everything. Her hands tightened slightly at her sides. You gave me a certificate in front of the entire school. My family celebrated. My mom cried. Her voice softened. We thought our lives were finally changing. I clicked the remote. The projector flickered to life. Blackwell Scholarship Certificate. Awarded to Sophie Martinez. Amount $320,000. Coverage. Full scholarship. 4 years. Institution. Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Authorized by Derek Blackwell. Founder date. Issued April 15, 2022. The document filled the screen. Formal letterhead, gold seal in the corner, Derek's bold signature across the bottom. Sophie's voice trembled slightly this time. But when I arrived at MIT orientation in August 2022, the financial aid office said they had no record of it. She paused. No payment had ever been made. The room remained completely still. My mother called your office 14 times, she continued, staring at Derek. No one ever called us back. We had 48 hours to pay tuition or I'd lose my place. She took a breath. My mom sold her car. Family members loaned us $50,000. Her eyes hardened. Now I'm $80,000 in debt, working 2 jobs just to stay enrolled. The older woman stepped forward. Sophie's mother, Maria Martinez, spoke quietly, but every word carried weight. My daughter should have been free, she said, addressing the board instead of Derek. She earned that freedom herself, through hard work, through sacrifice. Her jaw tightened. And this man stole it from her. I clicked to the next slide. Blackwell Scholarship Fund, Financial Review, 2021-2023. Total funds raised, $12,400,000 scholarships publicly promised. 2021, 60 students. 2022, 80 students, including Sophie Martinez. 2023, 107 students. Total students promised aid, 247 scholarships actually funded, $0 reported administrative expenses, $11,800,000, 95% of all raised funds. Remaining balance, $600,000, 5%. Actual destination of funds, Derek Blackwell's offshore accounts, Cayman Islands, Bahamas. The room went completely silent. Sophie isn't the only one, I said, breaking the stillness. There are 246 more families just like hers. Children who were promised futures. Parents who made impossible sacrifices because they believed Derek's lies. I paused, letting the words settle. I've personally contacted every one of them. 198 families have agreed to join a class action lawsuit. The remaining 49 have been referred to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I clicked to the next slide. IRS Criminal Investigation referrals charity fraud, $11,800,000 stolen from a 501c3 tax-exempt scholarship fund, tax evasion, $8,200,000 in undeclared offshore income. Expected federal consequences, 10-20 years imprisonment. Asset forfeiture, full restitution to victims, civil action status, 198 families participating in class action litigation, 49 families filing individual criminal complaints through IRSCI. Derek slowly lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot now. I was going to pay them back, he said weakly. I just needed time. Klaus was about to invest. Klaus doesn't exist, Derek. My voice sliced cleanly through the room. There was never an investor. No $50 million deal. I held his gaze. It was me. The entire time. The silence deepened. I spent 18 months constructing a false identity just to make you feel safe enough to confess your crimes on tape. I clicked the remote once more. And you confessed to everything. The final slide illuminated the screen. Klaus Vandenberg, fabrication timeline. Total cost of operation, $180,000 in components of deception. Zurich office lease and virtual operations. Planted media coverage in Financial Times and Bloomberg. Fabricated investment history and professional profile. Receptionist and communication services, AI voice synthesis system. $35,000 false infrastructure and media placement, $120,000 supporting identity assets, $25,000 recorded communications with Derek Blackwell. 67 calls documented recorded admissions include, "I've been creative with off-book opportunities, mostly client money, small amounts they won't notice. The charity money is just sitting there. I'll replace it once the Klaus deal closes. I need to move $8 million without the firm noticing. Can you structure it as a private placement?" "You confess to everything, Derek," I said quietly. "Every single word." His head dropped into his hands. His shoulders trembled. James Caldwell turned toward Sophie. "Ms. Martinez," he said carefully, "what do you need from Sterling and Chase?" Sophie blinked, startled. I don't know," she admitted softly. "I just wanted someone to know what happened. I wanted people to understand that we aren't numbers." Her voice tightened. "We're real people. We had dreams." James nodded slowly. "You'll receive your scholarship." The room shifted. "Sterling and Chase will fully cover your remaining tuition, housing, and living expenses for the next 2 years," he said firmly, "and we will work with Mrs. Blackwell to establish a compensation fund for the remaining families." He looked directly at her. "You have my word." Sophie's eyes immediately filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Beside her, Maria Martinez reached for her daughter's hand. Near the doorway, Agent Reynolds stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwell," she said evenly, "it's time." Derek rose mechanically, as though every movement weighed twice as much. He looked at Sophie, then at me. "You destroyed me," he whispered. "No," I replied calmly. "You destroyed 247 families." I stepped closer. "You destroyed Lily Harper. You destroyed every person who trusted you." My voice never rose. I just made sure there was proof. Agent Reynolds gestured toward the hallway, and the 2 FBI agents moved inside. "Derek Blackwell," she began, "you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, legal counsel will be appointed to you." The agents approached from either side, but before they could restrain him, Derek suddenly reached into his jacket. "Wait," he said, panic cracking through his voice. I can't do this." He pulled out something metallic, a handgun. The room erupted. Chairs scraped backward. Someone gasped. Agent Reynolds immediately drew her weapon. "Drop it," she ordered. "Drop the firearm now." But Derek wasn't aiming at anyone else. He pressed the gun toward his own temple, his hand shaking violently. "I can't go to prison," he said, tears streaking down his face. "I can't." "Derek, don't," Ethan said, standing abruptly. But this was predictable. Derek had always been theatrical. And when consequences finally cornered him, he reached for the oldest performance of all. His chair crashed backward as he stood straighter. "You took everything from me," he shouted. "What am I supposed to do now? Just give up?" I didn't move. "That," I said calmly, "is exactly what I expected you to say." His hand tightened around the weapon. "Maybe I should end this right now." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Ethan rose halfway from his chair, tense and alert. The pistol caught the overhead light. A black Smith & Wesson M&P 9mm. James Caldwell stood abruptly. "Derek," he said carefully, "put the gun down." Derek pressed the barrel harder against his temple. "I'd rather die than lose everything." The room froze. Agent Reynolds's hand moved closer to her holster. I raised one finger. "Wait." Every eye turned toward me. "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Pull the trigger." The room stared in disbelief. Derek blinked. "What?" "You heard me?" I said. "If you're really going to do it, then do it." I tilted my head slightly. "But we both know you won't." His finger trembled. "You think I'm too scared?" "I know you are." I said evenly. Because 2 weeks ago, Ethan replaced every live round in that gun with dummy ammunition. The room shifted again. You're holding training rounds, Derek. It won't fire. I clicked the remote. But more importantly, the projector flickered back to life. Derek Blackwell, rehearsal footage. Recorded via hidden camera location, Derek's office, Sterling and Chase State, February 18, 2024, 11:47 p.m. Duration, 4 minutes, 32 seconds. The video began. Derek's office appeared on screen, dark except for the Chicago skyline stretching behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. He stood alone, holding the same gun, the same Smith & Wesson M&P 9mm. Facing his reflection in the glass, he adjusted his grip. Then, clear as day, his recorded voice echoed through the room. Okay, here's the move. He shifted his posture. I say, I'd rather die than lose everything. Then I point the gun at my head. He practiced the motion. Everyone panics. Cassie panics. A smile briefly crossed his face, and in the chaos, I destroy the evidence and walk out. He lowered the gun. It's theater. A pause. Just theater. On screen, Derek raised the pistol again, carefully testing angles, expressions, timing, anguish, fear, desperation. He rehearsed the line repeatedly. I'd rather die than lose everything. Pause. I'd rather die than lose everything. Longer pause. I'd rather die than lose everything. He paused, then repeated it. I'd rather die than lose everything. This time, he checked his watch, timing the silence, measuring the dramatic pause like an actor rehearsing a final scene. The boardroom remained completely still except for the sound of the recording. In the present, Derek's face had gone ghostly pale. The gun trembled in his hand. James Caldwell stared at the screen, disbelief hardening into disgust. You were rehearsing, he said quietly. Across the table, Richard Hayes pushed back his chair. He planned this, he muttered. For months. I rose from my seat and walked slowly toward Derek. You were never going to pull the trigger, I said evenly. You're too much of a coward for that. His breathing caught. But you were perfectly willing to let everyone in this room believe you might. I stopped a few feet away. You wanted panic, chaos, sympathy. Just enough confusion to destroy evidence and run. My voice remained calm. That's who you really are, Derek. A performer. A fraud. I glanced briefly toward the screen. And your final performance just ended. His grip loosened. The gun slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a metallic clatter. Then he collapsed to his knees. Please, he whispered, his voice breaking. Cassie, please. Tears streaked down his face. I'll pay them back. I'll fix everything. You can't fix this, I said quietly. You can't fix Lily. I paused. You can't fix Sophie. Another pause. You can't fix the other 246 children whose futures you stole. I looked down at him. And you certainly can't fix yourself. Agent Reynolds stepped forward and nodded once toward the hallway. The 2 FBI agents entered immediately. Derek Blackwell, Agent Reynolds said, removing a pair of handcuffs from her belt. You are under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, embezzlement, charity fraud, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. Her voice was steady, practiced. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to legal counsel. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to represent you. She met his eyes. Do you understand these rights? Derek said nothing. One of the agents pulled him to his feet while the other secured the cuffs around his wrists. For a moment he looked at me, tears still falling. I loved you once, he whispered. No, I said softly. You loved yourself. I held his gaze. And now you'll have 20 years in federal prison to think about the difference. The agents guided him toward the door. His legs barely seemed able to support him. He glanced back one final time at James Caldwell, at the 11 directors seated around the table, at Ethan, at me. Then he disappeared through the doorway. The door shut behind him. Silence. For a long moment, no one spoke. Agent Reynolds bent down, picked up the gun with a gloved hand, checked the magazine, then exhaled through her nose. "Dummy rounds," she said. "Every single one." She looked at me. "You knew?" "Ethan told me 2 weeks ago," I said. When Derek started talking about his backup plan, Ethan got into his office after hours and switched out the ammunition. I folded my arms. We couldn't risk him hurting himself. My voice lowered. He needed to stay alive to stand trial. James leaned back heavily into his chair. "How long have you known about the rehearsal video?" "Since February 19th, I replied. "The hidden camera in Derek's office has been recording for 3 years. Ethan installed it with FBI authorization under a Title III warrant." I glanced toward the now dark projector. "We have hundreds of hours of footage." A pause. This was simply his most theatrical moment. Richard Hayes rubbed both hands over his face. "I worked with Derek for 12 years, he said quietly. "I had no idea." "That's how predators survive," Ethan said from across the room. "They're charming, convincing." He shook his head. "They make you believe you know them. A beat. But you never really do." Agent Reynolds turned toward James. "Mr. Caldwell, I'll need you and the board available for depositions in the coming weeks. We're building the federal case, and your cooperation will be essential." James nodded immediately. "You'll have everything you need." Agent Reynolds turned back to me. "Mrs. Monroe, tomorrow, 9 a.m. at the field office." She adjusted the file in her hands. "We'll review your testimony and the evidence package you assembled." "I'll be there," I said. She gave a brief nod and exited with the other agents. The door closed once again. 15 of us remained. Board members, Ethan, James, and me. The frozen image of Derek still lingered on the projection screen, his face twisted in staged desperation, caught mid-performance. I clicked the remote. The screen went black. Sophie Martinez and her mother had slipped out quietly during the arrest, but her words still hung over the room like smoke. "We're not numbers. We're real. We had dreams." James cleared his throat. "Mrs. Monroe," he said carefully. "What happens now?" I looked around the table. An hour earlier, these men believed they were attending an anniversary celebration. Now they understood they had spent years sitting beside a criminal. "Now," I said, "we make sure every family gets justice." I stood straighter. "We establish the compensation fund. We work with the FBI to recover every stolen dollar." My eyes moved across the room. "And we make sure Derek Blackwell's name becomes a warning." A pause. "Not a legacy." Richard Hayes leaned forward. "And Sterling and Chase?" "Sterling and Chase cooperates fully," I said. "You implement new compliance systems, audit every client account Derek ever touched." I let the words settle. "And you prove to the world this firm is bigger than one man's crimes." James held my gaze. "And your board seat?" "We'll discuss that tomorrow," I said. "After the FBI deposition. After everyone's had time to process tonight." Then I added, "But yes, I want that seat." My voice hardened slightly. "And I intend to use it to make sure this never happens again." But my work wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night. At sunrise on August 13th, I drove to the FBI field office on West Roosevelt Road and sat in a small conference room beside Agent Reynolds, watching Derek's arraignment on a closed-circuit monitor. The courtroom looked sterile. White walls, fluorescent lights. The Great Seal of the United States mounted behind the judge's bench. Derek stood in an orange jail uniform, wrists cuffed in front of him, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals. Beside him stood his court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, balancing a thick stack of paperwork. The magistrate judge adjusted his glasses and began reading. United States of America versus Derek Michael Blackwell. He looked down at the file. Counts 1 through 23. Wire fraud. In violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1343. A pause. Count 24. Count 24. Conspiracy to commit racketeering. In violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1961. Counts 25 through 36. Mail fraud. In violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1341. Counts 37 through 43. Tax fraud. In violation of Title 26, United States Code, Section 726. 43 counts. A theoretical maximum sentence of 120 years in federal prison. Derek stood motionless. His face had turned gray. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of the numbers alone had already buried him. The judge looked over her glasses. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, "how do you plead?" His public defender leaned toward the microphone. "Not guilty, Your Honor," she said, "and we respectfully request bail pending trial." At the prosecution table, a sharp-eyed federal prosecutor rose. David Walsh adjusted his jacket. "Your Honor, the United States strongly opposes bail." His voice was precise, clinical. Mr. Blackwell presents a substantial flight risk. He maintained offshore financial accounts in the Cayman Islands and the Bahamas totaling approximately $11.2 million. Those assets have since been frozen by federal authorities pending forfeiture proceedings. He glanced briefly at Derek. He no longer possesses meaningful community ties. He lacks stable employment, family support, and faces severe criminal exposure. A pause. The government respectfully requests detention without bail. The judge lowered her eyes to the file. Bail is denied. The words landed hard. Mr. Blackwell will remain in federal custody pending trial. She checked the calendar. Next appearance is scheduled for September 15th. The gavel struck. Derek's shoulders shook. One of the U.S. Marshals placed a hand on his elbow, guiding him toward the side exit. He moved mechanically, like someone already fading. Beside me, Agent Reynolds switched off the courtroom monitor. "We froze the $11.2 million in offshore accounts," she said. "The IRS is pursuing another $8 million in penalties for tax fraud." She crossed her arms. "Between your prenup enforcement, debt recovery, and federal forfeiture, Derek Blackwell will die owing money." I nodded once. "Good." She handed me a thick manila folder. "Restitution schedule." Her tone softened slightly. "Once the criminal proceedings conclude, the court will order repayment to every victim." She hesitated. "It won't cover everything. He doesn't have enough assets left. But it's a start." I opened the folder. 247 names, 247 families, a quiet reminder of everything he'd destroyed. "We're establishing the Victim Compensation Fund today," I said. "MC Ventures will contribute $12.5 million. I closed the folder. "And I'm asking Sterling and Chase to match it. $25 million total." Agent Reynolds held my gaze. "That's more than most victims ever recover." "It's still not enough," I said quietly. "But it's something." That afternoon, I drove to Sunrise Senior Living in Oak Park. Sunrise Senior Living smelled faintly of lavender and disinfectant. Patricia Blackwell sat beside the window, hands folded neatly in her lap. 71 now, hair fully white, age written softly across her face. She wore a lavender cardigan over gray slacks, while a nurse nearby adjusted the curtains to let more sunlight into the room. I sat across from her. "Patricia," I said gently. "It's Cassie." She looked up, eyes distant. "Are you my nurse?" she asked softly. "Something like that," I said with a faint smile. "I'm here to make sure you're safe." The truth was, Patricia would never fully understand what Derek had done. And maybe that was mercy. The irrevocable trust we'd established 4 years earlier would protect her for the rest of her life. $12,000 a month. Enough for care, comfort, dignity. Funded through her late husband's pension and long-term investments. Derek would never touch a dollar of it. Though he had tried. 2 days after his arrest, Derek's public defender filed an emergency petition in Cook County Probate Court. Claim: Patricia Blackwell lacked legal mental capacity when she executed the irrevocable trust in August 2020. Requested relief: invalidate the trust and transfer control of the estate to her son, Derek Blackwell. Patricia's independent attorney, Margaret Campbell, filed a response that same day. I reviewed the documents later inside an FBI conference room while Agent Reynolds worked quietly beside me. The defense was airtight. Medical evaluation, Dr. Harold Winters, 2020. Mini mental state examination score, 2730. Diagnosis: mild cognitive impairment, with a documented lucid interval confirming legal competency. Video evidence of trust signing, 4 minutes and 18 seconds of footage showing Patricia reviewing documents, asking questions, and signing voluntarily. Margaret Campbell had explained every clause in detail. On camera, Patricia had said clearly, "I want to protect my assets from Derek. He's never been responsible with money." Then came the handwritten letter. August 20th, 2020, 2 full pages, written entirely in Patricia's own hand. Derek has always been reckless. I've watched him waste thousands gambling and lie to me about debts. Cassie has shown me kindness. She visits twice every week. She listens. When I'm no longer able to manage my affairs, I trust her to do it. This is my decision. No one pressured me. Margaret Campbell's sworn affidavit reinforced every point. Patricia had independent counsel, no coercion, no undue influence, a fully informed and voluntary decision. On August 20th, Judge Ellen Morrison of the Cook County Probate Court issued her ruling. The language was direct. The irrevocable trust executed by Patricia Blackwell on August 22, 2020, was established during a documented lucid interval with full legal competency. She continued, "The petitioner, Derek Blackwell, has failed to provide credible evidence of fraud, undue influence, or diminished mental capacity." Final line: motion denied, trust upheld. I read the ruling twice, then set the order back down. Patricia was safe. Her assets were protected. Derek would never touch them. The following morning, I sat once again in the Sterling and Chase boardroom, the same room where, only 3 days earlier, Derek had attempted his final performance with a gun in his hand. Now it felt different, quieter, heavier. James Caldwell sat at the head of the table. The 11 directors occupied their usual seats. Ethan sat to my right. James cleared his throat. "Mrs. Monroe," James began, folding his hands on the table. "On behalf of Sterling and Chase, I want to offer a formal apology." The boardroom had changed. No tension, no deception, only consequences. "We failed in our fiduciary duty," he continued. "We should have detected Derek's misconduct long ago." He paused. "Your offer of a $50 million capital injection is generous." A glance around the room. "But before we discuss that, we need to address compensation for the victims." "I've already begun," I said. Everyone turned toward me. MC Ventures will contribute $12.5 million to establish a victim compensation fund. I slid a folder across the table. "I'm asking Sterling and Chase to match it. $25 million total. It won't undo what Derek destroyed," I said quietly. "But it's a beginning." James nodded immediately. "Agreed." No hesitation. "Sterling and Chase will match the contribution in full." He glanced toward the other directors. "We're also implementing immediate reforms, mandatory third-party audits, internal compliance restructuring, comprehensive client account reviews, and formal whistleblower protections. Across the table, Richard Hayes leaned forward. "And your board seat?" "I want it," I said simply. "Not for power, not for status. For accountability." I held his gaze. "I want to make sure this never happens again." James stood and extended his hand across the table. "Then welcome to the board, Mrs. Monroe." I shook it. To my right, Ethan leaned back in his chair, the faintest trace of satisfaction crossing his face. But legal consequences were only the beginning. Derek Blackwell's public collapse was about to become national news. The media storm began before sunrise on August 14th. I was sitting inside my Lincoln Park condo, the same condo Derek once believed belonged to him, drinking coffee as dawn stretched across Lake Michigan. Then my phone exploded. Texts, emails, breaking news alerts from apps I'd forgotten I even had installed. By 7 in the morning, the story was everywhere. The headlines came fast. Chicago Tribune, August 14, 2024. Billionaire wife exposes husband's $20 million fraud operation. Bloomberg, August 15, 2024. Sterling and Chase executive arrested on RICO and charity fraud charges. Forbes, August 20, 2024. Meet Cassie Monroe, the hidden billionaire who brought down her own husband. The Forbes piece changed everything. They'd sent a photographer to my new office, a glass-walled corner suite in Willis Tower with panoramic views stretching across the city skyline. The photo showed me standing beside the window in a navy blazer. Arms crossed, expression steady, controlled. It was the first time the public had seen my face. The article pulled back the curtain on MC Ventures, a $5.2 billion portfolio, 47 companies, 15 years quietly building an empire no one knew existed. And then came the quote they highlighted. This was never about revenge. It was about justice, for Lily Harper, for Sophie Martinez, and for the 246 other families Derek Blackwell betrayed. They deserved better. Now they'll finally have it. By the end of the day, the article had been shared more than 200,000 times. Social media erupted. Derek Blackwell trended for 11 consecutive days. The hashtag became a digital archive of outrage, screenshots from his charity speeches, videos from scholarship galas, photos of fake award certificates, statements from devastated families. Ethan launched another hashtag, Justice for Lily. Within 48 hours, it went viral. People reposted Lily Harper's MIT thesis, her Sterling and Chase acceptance letter, a photo of her standing on the Michigan Avenue Bridge, smiling, taken 6 months before she died. Then the families began speaking. Blackwell scholars' fraud parents who had sold cars. Students balancing 3 jobs. Dreams delayed, dreams destroyed. All because Derek Blackwell lied. His reputation didn't simply collapse, it was erased. On August 22nd, Sophie Martinez appeared on Good Morning America. I watched from my office. The interview played across the wall-mounted television. Sophie sat opposite the host, calm and composed, still wearing the same faded MIT sweatshirt she'd worn in the boardroom 9 days earlier. "He came to my school," Sophie said steadily. "He gave this speech about opportunity, about how education changed his life." She looked down briefly. Then he handed me a certificate promising $320,000. A pause. My family celebrated. My mother cried. We thought everything was finally going to be okay. The host leaned forward gently. "But it wasn't?" Sophie shook her head. "No." Her voice tightened slightly. "When I arrived at MIT, there was no scholarship. No payment. No record of anything." She exhaled slowly. "My mom called his office 14 times. No one ever called back. We sold her car. Borrowed $50,000 from relatives." Her eyes remained steady. "Now I'm $80,000 in debt. And I work 2 jobs just to stay in school." The host turned toward the camera. Joining us now via satellite is Cassie Monroe, founder of MC Ventures and the woman responsible for exposing Derek Blackwell's crimes. He smiled politely. Mrs. Monroe, thank you for being here. I nodded once at the camera from my office. Thank you for having me. The host smiled warmly. You recently announced the launch of the Second Chance Scholars Fund. Can you tell us more about it? I nodded. MC Ventures and Sterling & Chase have jointly committed $25 million to support the 247 families Derek Blackwell defrauded. The screen shifted to photos of students and scholarship documents. Each student will receive, on average, $100,000, I continued. Enough to cover years of tuition, reduce debt burdens, and restore opportunities Derek stole from them. The host smiled. That's extraordinary. I shook my head slightly. These students earned their futures, I said. Derek took them away. A pause. I'm simply helping give them back. By the end of that week, every one of the 247 families had been contacted. Sophie Martinez's $80,000 student debt was paid in full by MC Ventures. Her mother received $50,000 to replace the car she'd been forced to sell. The day Sophie got the money, she called me. At first, she couldn't speak. Only crying. 5 full minutes of it. Then finally. Thank you, she whispered through tears. You gave me my life back. No, I told her gently. You did that yourself. I smiled quietly. I just made sure Derek couldn't take it from you again. By November, Derek accepted a plea agreement. Federal prosecutors offered him 18 years in exchange for full cooperation and complete asset forfeiture. His attorney advised him to accept. The alternative, a trial on 43 federal charges, carrying a theoretical maximum sentence of 120 years, was impossible to gamble on. On November 18th, Derek stood before Judge Patricia Callahan in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois and pleaded guilty. Every count. The sentence came quickly. Final judgment. 18 years in federal prison. Eligibility for release after 15 years with good behavior, $14 million in restitution, funded through forfeited assets, permanent ban from the financial services industry, 10 years of supervised release following incarceration. Agent Reynolds sent me a copy of the sentencing order. I read it twice, then filed it away. Derek would be 62 when he got out. If he got out. On November 30th, I sat alone in my office watching the Chicago skyline disappear into sunset. People kept asking the same question. Did it feel good? Did I feel victorious? The truth was, I didn't feel much of anything. Lily was still gone. Sophie and 246 other students still carried scars from what happened. Derek could spend 15 or 18 years behind bars and it still wouldn't erase the damage. It wouldn't undo sleepless nights. It wouldn't restore stolen time. It wouldn't bring Lily back. What I felt wasn't triumph. It was closure. The man who destroyed my best friend, who stole her work, fabricated accusations against her, dismantled her reputation, and pushed her toward suicide, had finally been held accountable. Not through a settlement, not through fines, not through another quiet corporate cover-up, but through federal prison, 18 years, the complete collapse of everything he built. Derek Blackwell's name would never mean success again. It would mean fraud, greed, cruelty, a warning. And maybe, just maybe, Lily could finally rest. I stood and walked to the window. Chicago stretched endlessly beneath me, city lights glowing against the dark water of the lake. Life had moved forward. Ethan published a memoir, 7 Years, How My Sister's Death Became My Mission. It debuted at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. He donated every dollar of profit to mental health organizations. Sophie flourished at MIT. She switched her focus to biomedical engineering and joined a research lab studying Alzheimer's disease. Because of Patricia, she told me once. Patricia herself remained at Sunrise Senior Living, her care fully funded through the irrevocable trust. She no longer remembered Derek. Most days she didn't remember me either. Still, I visited twice a week. I sat beside her window, told her stories. Sometimes about flowers, sometimes about places she used to love, sometimes about the daughter she never had. Sterling and Chase followed through on every promise. The reforms James Caldwell pledged became permanent. I attended every board meeting, reviewed every compliance report, asked difficult questions, made certain what Derek had done could never happen again. And Derek? Derek sat inside a federal correctional institution in Terre Haute, Indiana, serving the first stretch of an 18-year sentence. For months, I barely thought about him, until 16 months later, when a letter arrived. December 15th, 2025, a cold Monday morning. The envelope waited on my desk, forwarded through my attorney. The return address stopped me cold. FCI Sandstone Federal Correctional Institution, Sandstone, Minnesota. Sender, Derek Blackwell, inmate number 84729, Z224. I stared at it for 10 minutes. Part of me wanted to burn it unopened. Another part wanted to throw it away and never think about him again. But curiosity won. I slipped a finger beneath the seal and unfolded 2 handwritten pages. The first line read, "Cassie, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you'll finish reading this. But I need to say this anyway. I'm sorry. Not because it changes anything, but because, for once, it's true. I've had a lot of time to think in here, about Lily, about Sophie, about every person I hurt. For years, I convinced myself I was smarter than everyone else, that I deserve success. The truth is, I was a coward. I always chose the easy way, and it cost me everything. You were right. I never truly loved you. I loved the version of you that made me look successful, the quiet, perfect wife who fit the image I wanted people to see. I'm ashamed of that now. I heard about the scholarship fund. Thank you for doing what I should have done. Those students deserved better. They deserved honesty. I'll be here for a very long time. Maybe that's what I deserve. Maybe prison is the first place I've ever been forced to tell myself the truth. I hope someday I can become the man Lily believed I was when she first met me. But I know that's no longer your burden to carry. I hope you find peace, Cassie. You deserve that. Derek. I lowered the letter onto my desk. Too little, I said quietly. Too late. Then I placed it in a drawer and never answered. 13 months had passed since Derek Blackwell's arrest. 13 months since I watched FBI agents lead him out of that boardroom in handcuffs. 13 months since I stopped pretending to be someone I was not. Everything had changed. In December 2024, I publicly stepped forward as CEO and founder of MC Ventures. The press conference lasted barely 10 minutes. No questions, no spectacle, just facts. $5.2 billion under management, 47 portfolio companies, 15 years quietly building an empire no one saw coming. In 2025, Forbes named me among the world's most powerful women. The cover photograph showed me standing in my Willis Tower office, Chicago stretched behind me. Arms folded, expression steady. The caption read, "The billionaire who dismantled her husband's empire and helped rebuild an industry." The Second Chance Scholars Fund officially launched in Lily's name, $25 million. Every one of the 247 affected students received substantial scholarship support, an average of $100,000 each, enough to reduce debt, enough to rebuild futures, enough to give something back. I stayed focused. MC Ventures expanded into clean energy, biotechnology, companies designed to matter, businesses built with purpose, and once a month, I drove to Sunrise Senior Living to visit Patricia Blackwell. Late-stage Alzheimer's had taken most of her memories. She no longer recognized me. Some days, she barely recognized herself. But I still sat beside her, reading novels, newspaper stories, sometimes just talking quietly about ordinary things, sometimes telling stories about a daughter she never had. Derek was serving his sentence at a medium-security federal prison in Minnesota. He worked in the prison library, taught GED classes to younger inmates. If everything went according to schedule, he would become eligible for release in 2039. His finances were ruined beyond repair. A net worth of negative $14 million. More debt than he would likely repay in a lifetime. Ethan walked away from finance entirely. Instead, he became an advocate for corporate whistleblowers, partnering with nonprofits to protect employees exposing fraud. In 2025, he released a memoir, 7 Years, The Long Game. It debuted at number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. Every cent went toward mental health organizations in Lily's memory. He began speaking at universities, Harvard University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Northwestern University, business ethics, corporate accountability, the cost of silence. Students stayed after lectures asking the same question. How do you do the right thing when the system rewards the opposite? Ethan always gave the same answer. You find someone who believes in the same truth you do, he told them, and you keep going. No matter how long it takes. Sophie Martinez graduated from MIT in May 2025 with a degree in biomedical engineering. She later joined a medical device startup within the MC Ventures portfolio, designing adaptive prosthetics for children. Affordable, flexible, life-changing. Eventually, she became the public face of the Second Chance Scholars Fund, traveling to schools, speaking at fundraisers, sharing her story. In nearly every speech, she said, "Cassie Monroe gave me my future back." Then she would smile and add, "Now I'm spending my life making sure no child ever experiences what I did." Patricia remained at Sunrise Senior Living, her care fully protected through the irrevocable trust we established years earlier. She was 73 now. Most of her memories had disappeared. She didn't remember Derek. She didn't remember me. Still, I visited. Every month. Court orders prevented Derek from contacting her until 2030. By then, she likely wouldn't remember him at all. Sterling and Chase rebuilt after the scandal. The board was restructured. James Caldwell eventually stepped down. Too much damage. Too much association with Derek. I ultimately declined the board seat, though I kept my 19% ownership stake. The company paid $18 million in restitution to affected clients and adopted strict compliance systems, external audits, and whistleblower protections. Ethan helped design much of it. Agent Reynolds was promoted to Assistant Special Agent in charge of financial crimes. Derek's case became training material for new investigators. How to build a RICO case. How to work with cooperating witnesses. How to document evidence strong enough to survive trial. In an interview with the Chicago Tribune, she said, "Mrs. Monroe's documentation was among the most thorough I've seen in 20 years. She practically did half our job for us." December 20th, 2025. I stood in my office looking out over Chicago. The city shimmered beneath the winter sun. On my desk sat a framed photo of Lily Harper at her college graduation, taken in 2013, cap slightly crooked, smile full of certainty, an entire future waiting for her. I picked up the frame. "We did it, Lily," I said softly. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." A pause. "I hope that's enough." Another pause. "I hope you're finally at peace." A knock interrupted the silence. Ethan stepped inside. "You ready?" he asked. "Scholarship ceremony starts in an hour." I placed the photo back on the desk. "Ready." I grabbed my coat. "Let's go meet the next generation." People still ask if I regret the years, the marriage, the planning, the obsession. The answer is no, because some things are worth waiting for. Justice is one of them. But if I'm being truthful, I also learned something harder. Revenge consumes. Justice restores. If I could go back, I would have reported Derek immediately, the moment I learned what happened to Lily. I would have trusted the process sooner. Trusted truth to surface without sacrificing years of my own peace. Because anger spreads, and betrayal leaves scars no victory fully erases. What happened taught me this. Choose accountability over revenge. Choose honesty over secrecy. Choose healing over hatred. And when life feels unbearably unfair, hold on to patience. Truth has a way of arriving. Eventually. I'm free now. But freedom came at a price I wouldn't wish on anyone, and maybe that's the real ending. Not revenge. Not victory. Just finally learning how to live after carrying pain for far too long.